Gavel proclamation. We're honored today by former State Senator Diane Rosenbaum, who is here today, and Sharon Harmon, who is the Executive Director of the Oregon Humane Society. They are here in force with many of their supporters, and we just had a really nice celebration outside talking about the great work of the Oregon Humane Society and the importance of caring for our four-legged friends in our community. And we also had the mayoral pet ambassador, Coco, who's sitting here in the front row. And so I'd like to read the proclamation, and then maybe afterwards we could come up and get a photo right here in front of the rostrum. And so here's the proclamation. Whereas, for 150 years, Oregonians have led with their hearts, creating a more humane society where animals are treated with kindness and compassion. And whereas the Oregon Humane Society was the fourth humane society established in the United States and has one of the highest save rates in the country. Loving pets is an Oregon State core value, and Portland has one of the highest pet ownership rates in the nation. And whereas canine companions are an integral part of the life of Portland. From dog parks to hiking trails to dog-friendly restaurants and breweries, our fondness for dogs is ubiquitous. And whereas the city of Portland has been named one of the most dog-friendly cities in the country, with an abundance of dog-friendly parks, restaurants, and shopping areas. And whereas Oregon has some of the toughest animal cruelty laws in the nation, and Portland ranks as one of the safest cities in America for animal protection. And now, therefore, I, Ted Wheeler, Mayor of the City of Portland, Oregon, the City of Roses, do hereby proclaim November 14th, 2018 to be Oregon Humane Society Day in Portland, and encourage all residents to observe this day. Thank you. Colleagues, I don't know if you want to say anything about your dogs. Commissioner Fritz, you look like you do.
I just need to speak up on behalf of cats. There was no reference to cats in the proclamation, and we also value our cats and cat owners, thank you, and other support animals.
I just want to say, Mayor, that I was misled by the Humane Society. Last week, I got a visit by the Humane Society with another dog that I thought was the mayor, so I spent the entire time sucking up to the mayor, only to find out that they'd done a bait and switch at the last minute. I actually have no built-up reservoir of goodwill now with this dog, so.
My cat, who is a rescue cat, is bigger than that dog.
Very good. Why don't we come on up here and get a photograph if we could.
Yeah, I had a big dog too. Huh? I had a big dog too. Yeah.
That's a big one.
Get a picture of
kind-heartedness and benevolence translated into action, legislation and advocacy, to give a voice to those who cannot speak for themselves. Today, the welfare of animals is evident in our state laws, our public artwork, and our community's nationally renowned life-saving success. For 150 years, the Oregon Humane Society has embodied each generation's determination to save lives, stop suffering, and bring loving best friends to our families. Today, the pioneers are now innovators, blazing new trails with record adoptions and life-saving programs, a teaching hospital for veterinarian students, behavior and spay-neuter resources for the community, a team of experts that can respond to disasters, and new tools and techniques for investigating and fighting animal abuse. And true to our history, OHS is the driving force behind some of the toughest animal cruelty laws in the country, making Oregon one of the safest places to be a pet in the country. As each new chapter unfolds in the Oregon Humane Society's history, the quest to do more is unwavering, fueled by the vision to create a more humane society.
Thank you. That's great. That's excellent. Thank you for your leadership. We appreciate it. Senator, it's good to see you again. Yes. Thank you. All right. Good morning, everybody. This is the morning session of the Portland City Council, 11/14/2018. Carla, please call the roll.
Udaly, Fritz.
Here.
Fish.
Here.
Saltzman.
Here.
Wheeler.
Here. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Portland City Council. The City Council represents all Portlanders and meets to do the city's business. The presiding officer preserves order and decorum during City Council meetings so everyone can feel welcome, comfortable, respected, and safe. To participate in council meetings, you may sign up in advance with the council clerk's office for communications to briefly speak about any subject. You may also sign up for public testimony on resolutions or the first readings of ordinances. Your testimony should address the matter being considered at the time. When testifying, please state your name for the record. Your address is not necessary. Please disclose if you are a lobbyist. If you are representing an organization, please identify it. The presiding officer determines the length of testimony. Individuals generally have 3 minutes to testify unless otherwise stated. When you have 30 seconds left, a yellow light goes on. When your time is done, a red light goes on. If you are in the audience and would like to show your support for something that is said, please feel free to do a thumbs up. If you want to express you do not support something, please feel free to do a thumbs down. Disruptive conduct, such as shouting or interrupting testimony or council deliberations, will not be allowed. If there are disruptions, a warning will be given that further disruption may result in the person being ejected for the remainder of the meeting. After being ejected, a person who fails to leave the meeting is subject to arrest for trespass. Thank you for helping your fellow Portlanders feel welcome, comfortable, respected, and safe.
Very good. First up, communications.
Item 1161, request of Philip J. Wolf to address council regarding an amendment to the caption ordinance.
Good morning.
Excuse me, give me just a second. All right. Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning, Mayor Wheeler. Good morning, City Commissioners, and all of our supporters and community members here. Good morning to all of you as well. First, before I begin, I would like to request, instead of 3 minutes, I would like 5 minutes for my testimony. This is not just a simple message. This is a true testimony that I would like to really be able to present in full.
Go ahead, Philip.
Thank you. First, a little bit of history. Amanda, Commissioner Fritz, I know that you were actually involved in a champion for the amendment and the captioning law that we already have, the ordinance that's in place, so thank you for all of that work. 3 years after the ordinance was passed, so from 2015 until today, I myself have been around the city of Portland at the DMV and other public places, restaurants and bars included, and I would say that about 80% of our city is in compliance with the captioning ordinance, but still about 20% of our city does not comply. This 20% is an issue, and I wanted to address that lack of compliance with amendments today. For example, I saw that there was no captions on the video at the beginning this morning, and then captions were added, but it's about an attitude of wanting to add these captions and these accommodations. So the 20% that do not comply with the ADA will now have to comply because of the amendments here. So I would love to make a few suggestions, friendly suggestions to amend this ordinance. I assume that all of you have already read this. I did send it to all of you before. Wonderful. One crucial thing that I would like to really make sure that everyone understands is about the fonts and the backgrounds of closed captioning. The color of the word itself should be yellow or white. I've noticed that some TVs have purple or even blue, and it's hard to see from a distance, and it blends in with what's going on the television screen, and it's not easy to see. I've asked managers in these places before to change the backgrounds on there, but they have refused, and I noticed that because the ordinance does not have something specifically stating that, they're not needing to comply. So I wanted to add that in. I've also noticed a lack of backgrounds with the captioning, so it's hard to see when you have a thin letter against the TV screen. It's easier to have a dark background on those words for anyone with vision problems, deaf-blind members of our community, and it's very stressful and tiring to have to depend on captions, so whatever we can do to make that visually easier on anyone that needs to depend on it so that they can casually enjoy whatever programming is on the same way that hearing members of the community are able to. So again, I just wanted to emphasize the importance of that dark background. It doesn't have an impact on our hearing members of the community who are watching, but it's a huge impact on the deaf community. And so there are things that I could expand on more, but for reasons of time, I won't do that today. You'll find some of that in the information I sent to you. Another example, last Thursday actually was here, and there are 4 TVs on the first floor in City Hall. There was no background on the closed captioning there. I actually brought a picture as an example. You can see the background behind the words is clear and makes it unable for us to read it clearly. Like I said, I'm sure that you all have read this already and familiar. I would love to be able to review and bring this to the table for a discussion and possibly a vote to go ahead and amend that ordinance to make sure that we're really providing an equitable opportunity for everyone. And I know I have about 2 minutes left, so I'm just going to wrap up with one last thought. I've noticed that for a lot of political, government, or emergency service vlogs and videos that are uploaded onto social media and to the internet, most of them are not captioned. And I have repeatedly asked people who are in charge of these videos to add the captioning to no avail. There is now a change that I've seen, and I do make sure to say thank you whenever I notice these captions, but it seemed like that change and that improvement was short-lived. And so I would like to be able to emphasize the fact that important information should be captioned, and anything regarding political, government, or emergency services or involves powerful decisions needs to be accessible for us, and historically they are not. I think that it's important for our leaders and for people in City Hall to keep track of 3 things. Political, government, and emergency services should always, always be accessible. And hopefully we can become an example for other cities in the United States to have videos captioned universally for access. If any of you have any questions about this, I'd be happy to answer that at that time now too.
Commissioner Fritz.
Thank you for bringing this forward, Mr.
You're very
Wolf.
welcome.
And I took note of your email when you sent it in. As you know, the Portland Commission on Disabilities, which is staffed in the Office of Equity and Human Rights, is taking a break until the new year. So that gives me some time to do some due diligence on your suggestions.
And I'm here to represent myself. I just wanted to clarify that. But
I appreciate that. Since the Commission on Disabilities was the entity that brought it forward before, I would like to have a review. And I also want to mention that City of Salem is considering a captioning ordinance, so I hope that you and your colleagues here today will contact them and offer your services. And then finally, we did pass a regulation that the city videos have to be captioned. We don't currently have an enforcement mechanism for that. So if anybody notices that a video that's posted on Portland Online, portlandoregon.gov, is not captioned, would you please email Yesenia Carrillo, who is my constituent services specialist, and we will follow up with the individual bureau until we can figure out a better compliance routine, because we do want to make sure that it's accessible for all kinds of different reasons. And I also very much agree, it was an omission in the original ordinance about the background on the captioning. So while many of the establishments that I've visited are technically complying, it is very difficult, especially for those of us with visual impairment as well, to read the captions. And I appreciate them, even though when the sound is off on the television, I appreciate knowing what's going on the screen, and there were multiple benefits, as we knew when we passed the ordinance before. So thank you for bringing this to our attention, and I'm happy to take the leadership in working on your suggestions.
On a personal note, Philip, you and I don't always agree on everything, but I want to thank you for your leadership on this issue, and I want to thank you for opening my eyes to the deaf community in our state. I appreciated joining you at the Northwest Deaf Festival for the Arts last summer. And captioning is an issue that I frankly didn't know very much about until I got here to City Hall. And you have been very helpful in helping me to understand the importance of not only captioning, but how the captioning is done. So I thank you for that, and I appreciate your being here today.
thank you very much. You're welcome. Any other questions from any other commissioners? No, perfect.
Thank you, Philip.
Thank you very much. Just as a wrap up, I want you all to know that I mean well and I'm always here. I have many, many options and many ideas to provide in terms of accessibility, and I'd be happy to help with all of that. So thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
$11.62, a request of Stan Herman to address council regarding an answer to a question.
Good morning, Stan.
Oh, well, here we are again. You know, I really respect your position that you've chosen to represent the city of Portland. But again, I must switch this business communication to a political agenda. Our city leaders, you, are paid to voice your opinions and make decisions. I've seen and heard your remarks and your votes on many issues in the city council meetings. I've been asking my city leaders for an opinion starting from my first appearance 2 years ago, 24 months ago, November 2016. For the record, why are you not giving me an opinion to my question I presented 2 years ago? I'm not asking for a legal answer. Rather, just please read and give me your personal understanding and who should enforce ORS 830.035. Mr. Mayor, no disrespect, but 156 days ago, we met, and as of today, we have no progress regarding that meeting. On January 20th, 2017, I hand-delivered to all of your offices the statute of reporting enforcement law for the ORS 30.05. Would you please, I'll give you a minute so you can read that. I think you have it in front of you, do you? Please give me your opinion to my question below. I'll try to make this simple as possible. On the second page, please reply with an X on this paper stating your opinion regarding my question. The question again, Oregon State Statute Reporting and Enforcement Law, ORS 830.035. Who's responsible to enforce this regulation? Put an X on yes. I think the City of Portland Police Department is responsible and should have launched an investigation. Or you can put an X on no. I think the City of Portland Department has no responsibility to enforce and launch an investigation regarding Mr. Herman's reported hit and run to his building on 1300 North River Street, or you can choose the third one. I don't care to comment on Mr. Herman's question. And if you'd like to reply, I'd like to take your information with me, and I gave you an extra copy for your records. The bottom note is the first responder to that accident was Officer Jeff Myers, which, required by state law, he was supposed to start an investigation, but he did nothing. Any questions I can answer? Thank you.
Just like to respond that I've actually added a number 4, and I'll give you that with the signatures. I've already sent you a letter with my response. I'll be happy to resend it.
Okay. Can you guys respond to my paper there, one way or another? And give me a...
I'll resend my letter.
Anybody else? No response?
We'll send you the whole file again.
Okay.
Next individual, please.
Item 1163, request of Mike O'Callahan to address council regarding update on shelterlessness.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you. My name's Michael O'Callahan. It was good to hear about the Humane Society making Portland a more compassionate place for animals. You know, maybe it'd be a good idea to expand their mission to include humans. I would think they would do a little bit better job with homelessness. Well, congratulations. Okay, I want to start out on a good note. Okay, only 79 people died last year on the street. A drop of 1 from 80. Good deal. The sweeps. Now, I was here last time. I asked you the question what the outcome of the sweeps was. You gave me an answer. That really wasn't an answer. So I would like you to know what the outcome of the sweeps are. Okay? 3 days without sleep, you're certifiably insane. Physiological fact. Another that they have found, which is really quite interesting, is that social isolation causes addiction. You know the classic one of the rat with the cocaine, they'll take the cocaine till it dies, right? Well, this guy says, oh, hey, let's put them in a cage with other rats and other food and see what happens. They don't do that. Okay, so the mythology out on the streets is that we're all alcoholic, mentally ill drug addicts. Okay, why? Were they all alcoholic, mentally ill drug addicts when they were housed? No, they weren't. Okay, this is what your sweeps are causing. Okay, they're illegal. Okay, here's the response that I got to my 2-page from your attorneys. Okay, about a restraining order. Prohibit the sweeps because they're unconstitutional. 2 pages I wrote, and this is the response I got. In this litigation, I'm not, if you're really familiar with the term churn, okay, look at my previous litigation up to 9th and back down. See how much churn your attorney's office has put into my case, and see how much churn they're going to put into this case. This is an example. Okay, solutions. I like to orient toward solutions. 3 solutions here, okay? Villages, you've seen the replication. This works, you know that. You need a code to allow small villages, 25 or smaller. You can even put them on there for 90 days at a time with a community agreement. You can do all kinds of things, okay? That's number 1. This is a doable. Another one, which is really kind of interesting, over here on 6th and Division Place, they just built a great big building storage unit. I got some of my stuff stored in there. Go lease it or buy it for 5 years. They got 1,200 units in there. You can put in the bigger units, you can put families in there. They've got coded security for entrance. You'd have to put things on there for, you know, more showers and things like that. Oh, and one more comment about the roses. I'm working the roses in the Lad Edition. Okay, and they came through with a hedge trimmer and cut all the roses down. Okay, I say, Chloe, you know, could you tell them not to use hedge trimmers on roses? Okay, you can communicate with the rose gardens about that.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you coming in. Next individual,
1164, request of Terry Parker to address council regarding Northeast 60th Avenue street lighting.
Thank you. And I just want to remind people, the council rules, the reason we don't clap or boo or anything is it's distracting to people. So please just thumbs up or thumbs down is sufficient. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Terry Parker. I'm speaking on the behalf of the Rose City Park Neighborhood Association. Late last year, the Rose City Park Neighborhood Association, through Central Northeast Neighbors, applied for a placemaking in the streets grant to install 2 pedestrian scale street lamps at the intersection of Northeast 60th Avenue and Halsey Street. Planning was already underway by PBOT to pull together funding associated with the Growing Transit Communities program for new sidewalks, replacing 3 to 4 foot wide sidewalks on 60th Avenue between Halsey Street and the MAX station. The grant, which was not awarded, was to be a demonstration project with the goal of adding pedestrian scale streetlights at all intersections between Halsey and MAX at the same time the sidewalks are replaced. Since then, full funding has been found for the new sidewalks. PBOT advised me that if the project came in under budget, some lighting could be included. I am told by experts the new LED streetlights PBOT has installed citywide deliver the same amount of light as the older sodium vapor lighting. It may be the color or the fact that it's cut-off lighting, but it is far more difficult to see pedestrians crossing the streets with the new lighting. The majority of the area around 60th Avenue MAX station is currently built up with mostly modest single-family residences. The entire area has been upzoned for higher densities. A number of the streets do not have sidewalks. Within the past year, 2 commercial properties at 60th and Halsey have been sold to a developer. The Rose City Park Neighborhood Association has maintained that infrastructure needs to be in place before any new development occurs. 60th Avenue should be a street with amenities that says it goes somewhere and safely connects people and places. The Rose City Park neighborhood is and always has been, from the time it was platted in 1907, a working class neighborhood where families have called home for much of their lives. I have lived in the neighborhood for over 60 years. My neighbor to the south has lived in the neighborhood just under 60 years, with others on the street living in their homes for 30 years or more. This type of long-term investment is what makes a stable and livable neighborhood. We pay our share of taxes, but like the grant dollars, much of the money goes elsewhere. I have been told by PBOT that Prosper Portland has changed their mission and no longer offers placemaking grants. The need for those types of grants still exists. What I'm asking for today is to add $250,000 to $300,000 to the 60th Avenue sidewalk budget for the purpose of adding pedestrian scale streetlights, if necessary, from the general fund, which is supported by property taxes. Although the lighting is not mode specific, think Vision Zero and a street that attracts people walking, especially from to and from MAX. It simply makes sense to add the pedestrian scale streetlights when the new sidewalks are constructed so some of the costs can be shared. And just for the record, the TriMet letter, which I'm reusing, I got permission from Steve Whittier to include it in the packet today.
Great. Terry, could I ask you one question? In here, there's a letter, and it says the cost is approximately $10,000. Is that per light, or what is that $10,000?
That's per light standard, and that was obtained when I was working on the grant from Dan Layden, who is a PBOT employee.
And you'd propose then approximately 25 lights, is that correct? Just in the immediate vicinity of the MAX?
Right, okay, on the street there. A couple at each intersection. I think it's actually 28 if you had it full, but I'd have to go back and recount now. There's a picture in there that shows the proposed lights, the little
I see it.
The little
okay.
stars.
Got it. Thank you, Terry. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I just want to say this predates PBOT being in my portfolio, but I'll certainly follow up on this and try to get the answer back to you this week.
You need to check in with your office or anything like that?
You could talk to Marshall, sure.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Terry.
Great. Thank you, Terry. Next individual, please.
Item 1165, request of Colette DeWitt to address council regarding impact of rental relocation ordinance.
Good morning.
Hi. So I was here this summer to talk to you about returning to Portland after working overseas for 5 years and needing to pay my renters $4,200 to move out of my apartment or my condo. That's happened. I sold it. I paid the rent thing, got taken care of. Now I bought a place I can afford on my Social Security out in Southeast Portland, and I have another issue, which is I am living by, even my son warned me, can you do this, Mom? I'm like, no problem. They're squatters. They are criminals. There's criminal activity going on all the time. There was a fire they started in the backyard with trash a couple weeks ago, and this is sad, it's on the Humane Society Day, but I called about the fire. The fire department came. I warned them that there are these 2 pit bulls in the yard, and anyway, eventually the dog was shot. Do you remember this? The Portland police had to shoot a dog. So this is my new neighborhood. And I'm not complaining, okay? They're gonna be gone because they're really saying, even to the police, well, everything was fine before she got here. So you have Mrs. Kravitz out there, right? But what I don't understand is how homeowners, people who have properties, who do, for instance, I had a property manager when I was overseas and took care of my property. I had to pay over $10,000 to improve my place after the renters left in order to sell it. I learned to refinish a countertop. Okay, I did a lot myself. So how is it that homeowners are so vilified with this rental relocation ordinance? And how can you help homeowners like me who are moving into a place that needs improvement? Also, I live by Laotian, Vietnamese, Chinese, and young property owners, you know, first-time buyers. And I want this neighborhood to improve. It can. But the reason no one's called, there was an invalid living in my home, right? So now it's up to a 65-year-old white woman to call, and people are listening. What can be done? 2 issues.
I mean, it sounds like this is a zombie house, perhaps. Do you know who the owner? Okay, I know it's a strange term.
Well,
so
no, they know the owner.
They do know the owner.
Yes.
Yeah.
A neighborhood response team, East Precinct, Robert C. Brown and Joe Young talk to me often. I talk to the coding department, child protectives. I mean, I call all the time.
So, but you describe them as squatters, but they know the owner. So are they there with permission or not?
No. Not that anyone can prove.
Okay.
I think they met in jail. Yeah. But it's been going on for years, and in fact, their neighbor, I just met him, he put his house on the market, and he was practically in tears, and he said, I love my home, and I can't live by these people anymore. My wife won't live here anymore with me. So, you know, I'm a homeowner, I'm gonna make it better. But on the other hand, I was vilified as a homeowner for renting my place out when I went overseas. So we're not all bad people. And that's what I think that rental relocation ordinance switched it over, so that all landlords are people trying to take money from renters. It's not true.
Well, you may be a good landlord, but we have thousands of landlords taking advantage of a housing crisis, raising rents.
Okay, Chloe,
No, your time is up, and you are criticizing my policy, so I get to respond. We didn't vilify homeowners. We told landlords, if you are going to no-cause evict or raise your tenant's rent 10% or more, which, by the way, is 3 or 4 times the average annual cost increase, you will share in the burden that you are creating for your tenant and for this city. Now, it doesn't sound like you were one of those landlords, and I'm sorry that it negatively impacted you, but we had to take action to protect hundreds of thousands of renters who are at risk of displacement and homelessness. And that's all I want to say.
Can I say just a little more?
This isn't an opportunity for a dialogue. Feel free to contact my office.
Did you watch my previous testimony?
So let me do this, because the commissioner is correct. This is communications. It's not a game show.
I'm just wondering if she saw my previous one.
There is more to this. As I was listening to your testimony, there's also a public safety component here, and there's a policing component. And it sounds like you are in touch with your precinct. Is that correct, or,
yes.
or no? Okay.
Yes, I called them.
And if you need me to connect with somebody there, let me know, and you can.
I would like that. Do I just tell them when I?
Is Michelle still? Yeah, just talk to Michelle and give her your contact information. I'll follow up and get back in touch with you.
Thank you very much.
Certainly.
And Chloe,
Thank you for coming.
I wanted to be here last time so you could.
Thank you.
So
Very good. All right. Consent agenda. Have any items been pulled, Carla?
I've had no requests.
Call the roll.
Udaly?
Aye.
Fritz?
I want to note, or I am going to note, that the consent agenda includes replacing gender-specific language in Title 21, which is the Water Bureau's code. All bureaus were directed to update their codes to remove gender-specific language, and I'm really proud that the Water Bureau is first out of the gate. Aye.
Fish?
Aye.
Saltzman?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye. Consent agenda is adopted. First time certain item 1166.
Authorize the purchase of certain real property known as the Westwind Apartments located at 323 and 3237 Northwest 6th Avenue for purchase price and closing cost in an amount not to exceed $3,052,056.
Colleagues, we regularly hear during communications that we are either not addressing the homeless crisis or we are not sufficiently addressing the homeless crisis. I hope that this ordinance goes some way towards compelling people to understand that we are approaching this with a sense of urgency, that it is a priority, that we are making significant investments, and we are even taking significant risks to be able to address this crisis that we all agree is unfolding on our streets. This ordinance is for the acquisition of the Westwind Apartments in Old Town to be redeveloped under Portland's housing bond, which was supported by the voters in the city of Portland. The Westwind represents the 5th property identified for the bond program, bringing the total number of units acquired and planned to just over 600, nearly halfway towards our goal of 1,300 units. Currently, the Westwind provides 70 low-cost, low-barrier, single-room occupancy units. This acquisition will preserve a scarce type of housing that's vital to our efforts to tackling homelessness in the central city for our most vulnerable neighbors and moves us closer towards our goal of 2,000 units in 10 years with regard to supportive housing. Future plans to replace the existing building will create new units that are safe, high quality, and permanently affordable homes with services for very low-income individuals, including permanent supportive housing units. And so with that, I'll turn it over to our presenters panel. We have Shannon Callahan, of course, from the Portland Housing Bureau, Mark Jolin from the Joint Office of Homeless Services. Welcome, and thank you both for being here.
Good morning, Mayor. Thank you very much. Shannon Callahan from the Portland Housing Bureau. I am pleased today to be here to request your authorization to purchase the Westwind Apartments located on Northwest 6 in the Old Town neighborhood. I'm also joined here by Mark Jolin, and in a moment you will also hear from Andy Shaw and Dana Brandon of Central City Concern, as well as Peter Breyer of Home Forward, all of whom are partners in helping us operate, provide services, and provide vouchers, rent support for low-income households who will be residing in the future Westwind. As you heard at the permanent supportive housing briefing that you and Multnomah County held earlier this year, this is a joint project of the Portland Housing Bureau, the Portland Housing Bond specifically, and Multnomah County. As the mayor mentioned, the Westwind has for many years served as low barrier housing for many of our most vulnerable residents. And to our knowledge, it's one of the last remaining single room occupancy buildings in private hands within the central city. Many of the single room occupancy buildings that we've been able to save are either in the ownership of the Portland Housing Bureau or our partners, notably, as you'll hear from Central City Concern, who owns many of the single room occupancy buildings left remaining in the central city. The fate of this building has long been on many of our city agencies' radar, including the Portland Housing Bureau, the Bureau of Development Services, many of the county's agencies, including mental health and addiction services, as many of their clients reside in this building and currently receive services from the county agencies. When we heard that this building last year was had the potential for sale, we all worked together to act to save and preserve this building, both for the current tenants and for the future tenants. And we're pleased that after almost a year of working on this building, we're here today to bring you this purchase. As the mayor mentioned, we do plan on replacing this building with approximately 70 units, which is currently the current number of units in the building. We have about 50 of those units that are currently occupied by households, many of whom have been placed either through county services or our nonprofit support partners. This ordinance today asks you to approve approximately $3 million of downtown waterfront urban renewal area. We will be using those funds to acquire the building, and then in partnership with Multnomah County and the Housing Bond, we'll be replacing that building. I also would like to note that we are currently exploring the use of low-income tax credits, which to replace this building, it is made possible to us by the adoption of Measure 102 last week, the constitutional amendment. This was not something that was possible before that, but it could bring a significant amount of equity and capital to replace this building and ensure both a safe community for the residents, but also a lively commercial ground floor for the Old Town neighborhood.
By the way, when is 102 effective?
It goes into effect 30 days from the time that it is certified by the Secretary of State, and I apologize, I don't know that that has occurred yet.
Okay.
But we are working with the Bond Oversight Committee the first week of December to start to make plans on how to adapt the rollout of the constitutional amendment as it relates to the Portland Housing Bond. As the mayor mentioned, this property is significant to ensuring the goals that you set for reaching supportive housing, 2,000 new units in the next 10 years. As you heard earlier this year, we've already programmed or planned for at least 500 of those units. And finally, before I turn it over to Mark, I'd like to note, as the mayor said, that this is the 5th bond project that we've identified, which so far we've identified more than 634 new units or acquired units of housing. And I am pleased today to turn it over to Mark Jolin of the Joint Office.
Thank you, Shannon. Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners. Mark Jolin, I'm the Director of the Joint Office of Homeless Services, and I just want to take a minute to celebrate the partnership that this project represents amongst all of us who you'll hear from today, but in particular the city and the county. At the time that Wapato was sold last year, the County Commission, in a resolution brought forward by Commissioner Lori Stegman, directed an exploration of the best uses of the proceeds from that sale. There was quickly agreement that the most critical need was to expand permanent supportive housing. We reached out to Shannon and the Portland Housing Bureau asking where there might be an opportunity to co-invest the funds in a project with the city that would add supportive housing capacity, in particular for people who are chronically homeless and struggling with serious mental and physical health challenges. The Westwind represented the perfect opportunity to acquire a building to prevent the displacement of the vulnerable tenants already in that building and to invest in replacing it with 70 new SRO units with intensive on-site support services. The county board voted unanimously to approve the intergovernmental agreement transferring $4 million to the Portland Housing Bureau for use in the redevelopment of the Westwind. As the project moves forward, the Joint Office will use city and county supportive housing funds to provide the wraparound support services that the tenants in the building need. We will also use our coordinated access system to ensure equitable access to the units for the most vulnerable adults in our community. Through a network of more than 27 nonprofits, including 7 culturally specific providers, we have implemented a single assessment for supportive housing that can be conducted anywhere in the community. We've trained more than 200 people to conduct those assessments. Coordinated access prioritizes people for access to the dozens of different supportive housing projects in our community, including both permanent supportive housing and recovery housing. No longer does someone who is extremely vulnerable have to travel all over town to be assessed and apply for multiple different supportive housing programs. They do one assessment and we match them to units as they become available in any of the community's supportive housing projects. And given that some people are so vulnerable and isolated that they won't seek out services themselves, we have a whole team of outreach workers who are in the community conducting supportive housing assessments on the streets and in people's camps. Right now, we have about 1,300 chronically homeless people who've been assessed through coordinated access and are waiting to be matched for an appropriate supportive housing unit. The Westwind will be a critical addition to the inventory of units available to these extremely vulnerable people in our community, many of whom are living unsheltered. The Westwind is also a great example of the kind of partnership that will allow us to fulfill the promise of adding at least 2,000 units of supportive housing in our community by 2028. I thank you for your support of the Westwind acquisition and of the people in our community who so desperately need this kind of housing opportunity.
Thank you.
With that, Mayor, I'd like to invite up Andy Shaw and Dana Brandon of Central City Concern, as well as Peter Beyer of Home for All.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Colleagues, while they are coming up, I'd like to add a technical amendment at the request of the Housing Bureau. The amendment would read as follows: to ensure that we're in compliance with local budget law, I move to strike section 1C, which reads, C, increase appropriations to Portland Housing Bureau by $154,000 through the end of the current fiscal year, and replace the language with the following: in order to ensure sufficient cash flow to operate the subject property for the remainder of the fiscal year, this ordinance authorizes a transfer of $154,000 from the Housing Investment Fund to the Tax Increment Financing Reimbursement Fund. Can I get a second? Carla, please call the roll.
Udaly?
Aye.
Fritz?
This is a technical amendment that I can't imagine anybody would object to. Aye.
Fish?
Aye.
Saltzman?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye. Amendment's adopted. Sorry, and welcome. Thank you for being here. We appreciate it.
Good morning.
My name is Andy Shaw. I'm the Director of Housing at Central City Concern. I'm here to speak a little bit about the historical use of the Westwind as a low-income and low-barrier housing, and also talk about the importance of preserving this housing type and benefits to this neighborhood and the city, and how the Westwind, properties like the Westwind, is also a tremendous asset for service providers. Lastly, I also want to talk a little bit about CCC experience operating and managing low-barrier housing for very low-income individuals. I think we have a few minutes or so. Okay. So Westwind, I think a couple of years ago, there was a study in San Diego that came out that talked about the correlation between the loss of SRO housing to the rise of homelessness in that city. And I think since the 1980s, about 14,000 units of SRO housing, they started losing about 75% of their 14,000 SRO units. And concurrently, they saw a rise in homelessness. I think the city's acquisition of the Westwind is a great step forward to reversing trends like that in our city. This morning, I was just there and just seeing kind of how neglected the property is. There was, falling kind of plaster, and I think a lot of people there were hoarding activities and very filthy conditions. And so the city's acquisition of the Westwind is really critical in not only reversing the role of providing more affordable housing, but really kind of helping those who have been most marginalized to kind of to get connected to services. In terms of assets, as you know, Central City Concern, the four arms of our organization is health services, behavioral health, employment services, and housing and supportive housing services. And I know that in a lot of the SROs currently owned, at least in one of the SROs currently owned by private owners, we have in one building, not the Westwind, another building, we have at least 20 individuals connected to our health services and behavioral health arm. So I think these assets are very critical because our primary care physician, our behavioral health staff, one of the things they'll tell you is health without housing is impossible because people just get their wounds kind of open up again and they have no place to stabilize. Finally, our experience operating and managing low-barrier housing, we have about at least 10 SRO properties right in the vicinity within the Westwind Apartments in near Old Town. And we've been doing this since 1979. So we're confident that we can go in and properly manage the property for the city until a more long-term game plan will be in place. I'm going to turn this over to Dana Brandon, our Director of Supportive Housing.
Good morning, Dana Brandon, Director of Supportive Housing at Central City Concern. I'm just going to talk briefly about the types of services that we provide in our buildings. We, as you know, we're up to almost 23 buildings of affordable, low barrier, in most cases, buildings with recovery housing as well. We have on-site staff in some of our buildings, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We have resident services support coordinators who assist our permanent tenants with any variety of needs that they might have. We support them in eviction prevention. We support them in acquiring food. We help connect them to health services if they're not connected. So we provide really robust services throughout our portfolio in every building with resident services coordinators as well as case management staff in a number of our buildings. So we have, as I know you all know, great depth and breadth of experience in providing this work and ensuring the safety and security of the buildings that we oversee.
Thank you. Mayor, can I ask a question?
Commissioner Fish.
One of the things that discouraged me a little bit in an otherwise very successful election season was when we were making the case about ballot measures 102 and 26-199, there were some people that chose to oppose the regional bond on the grounds that by serving low-income people with particularly people that had needs beyond just subsidized housing, needed intensive services, we were at risk of creating, and I'm going to put this word in quotation marks because I can't believe in 2018 we're using language like this, but we're going to create ghettos throughout the region. And that was a line of argument used at editorial board meetings and some public meetings. Well, clearly the public rejected that scare, that fear-mongering that happened during the campaign. But I think it is fair to ask you, from your position, what's the most persistent myth that we have to sort of address about why it is nationally it's become a best practice to provide a deeply affordable rental apartment with services to help chronically homeless people get back on their feet?
I don't know. I really don't know. Certainly one of the myths around the homeless is that the homeless want to be on the streets, that they don't want to be in housing. And I guess that's a myth about homelessness that I see as being perpetuated.
Yeah. I can also kind of speak to that. I think CCC's approach is to provide comprehensive services, employment, housing, supportive housing, and mental health and primary care. And I think what we've seen is, people who come through our housing, they are desperately want to have safety and security, employment. And within our organization, what I see my staff is who have kind of come through the ladder from homelessness to voluntary through our community volunteer corps to getting employment. What I see is like some of our best employees are actually people who have come through from homelessness through recovery. So I think that the myth that by providing more housing and intensive services is going to create more ghettos, I simply don't see that that's the case. That hasn't been my lived experience with my own staff, and I think CCC, we have one occupational therapist that serves Huber Detox. And I think what she'll tell you is like people who come through recovery, they do want to get employed, they do want to get better. I think people need ideas on how they can manage their pain, how they can kind of live a more stable life. So I think the need for services is tremendous, because I think people need that navigator or people with special expertise to really help them overcome barriers.
Yeah, so. Thank you. Yeah.
Good morning, Mayor and council members. My name is Peter Beyer, and I am the Chief Financial Officer and current Acting Executive Director of Home Forward. Home Forward is proud to partner with the city to help acquire, build, and asset manage housing funded by Portland's Affordable Housing Bond. We enthusiastically endorse the acquisition and redevelopment of the Westwind Apartments. In connection with the passing of the housing bond, Home Forward utilized the flexibility of our special moving to work designation to ensure we could commit to pairing up to 400 project-based vouchers with bond funds. From what was envisioned at that early time, the Westwind Apartments represents a perfect example of the value we saw in pairing vouchers with the bond. It is a building that is located in a great neighborhood, near amenities, services, and transportation. There are multiple partners working together to ensure the residents will have access to the ongoing services they need, and because of the vouchers, the property will serve people living with very low incomes and help people transition from homelessness. Beyond the voucher commitment, Home Forward will provide asset management services for the property. We have decades of experience in asset management and managing properties like the Westwind Apartments, and our asset management team is incredibly skilled, and we will utilize our expertise and the processes we have spent decades developing to ensure the Westwind is successful, not just from a physical asset or a financial statement perspective, but from a livability perspective. Housing is at the core of what Home Forward does, but the people are the reason that it matters. I know the members of this council understand the importance of the PSH model of housing, and as was stated, the challenge for our community will be to stay focused and committed to all three words connected with that acronym: permanent, supportive, and housing. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the City Council and all of our partners for entrusting us with this work. We are excited about the Westwind Apartments, and we're looking forward to helping create a building that will be a long-term and vital resource for Portlanders now and for years to come. Again, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks all three of you. Appreciate it. Thanks for your partnership. Public testimony, Carla.
Yes, we have 4 people signed up.
Very good.
The first 3 are Charles Bridge Crane Johnson, Maggie, and Joe Walsh.
Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. It's not fun to be the bearer of bad tidings, to have to. So just to be clear, this project does nothing to address homelessness. It's a place that has 50 people living in it now, and when you're done, it'll have 50 people living in it. So it's a zero net on homelessness. It is changing the status of those units from slumlord operated $500 per month paid by people who only have $700 a month of income to those people now be paying 30% of their income and will live in a clean, hygienic building. But it's actually zero gain in the struggle to end homelessness, period. There's no way around that, no matter how, you're welcome to invite them back, but that's the actual song and dance truth here.
Can I answer that question for you?
There's no, the other thing is that this isn't nothing. What this is taking $2 million, you could go over there and get a bag of $2 million, or you could just get a nice check. And we're taking it to Newburgh I lost the address, I'm not going to log in, and giving it to the slumlord that bought this building in 2004. So in 2004, a predatory slumlord bought this building for $1.1 million, has emotionally and psychologically abused every human being that has lived there since 2004, and now we're giving them a $2 million cash reward. The people that live in this building deserve this project. They deserve to be saved, rescued, helped. We need permanent supportive housing. This plan, and we've only seen a glimpse of it, because what we're talking about is buying the property for $3-point-something million in here. We're not talking about the actual construction cost of replacing the building. That comes next. Then there's the funding of the PSH, the permanent supportive housing. So it's sad, but that's the simple truth. We have a building that has had at times 50 to 70 people in it. We're going to shut it down for a while, like we've done for the Joyce. Be great to also get an update on the Joyce at this time. So people just need to know that that's the truth. No net increase in available beds, roomettes, housing, apartments come from any of the money that will be expended at this address. It is only a change in classification from a building that you guys could have had for free. If you had, as Ms. Udaly has pointed out, we need rental inspections. We have people living in substandard, dangerous places with abusive landlords. If, when I moved to the city in 2011, people had been going into the Joyce and documenting that, you would have had a clear eminent domain case.
Can I answer your question now? The difference is it's now permanent. We own it. So in perpetuity, this facility will be available to people. And because we own it, we can actually build larger on the site and put more people into permanent supportive housing. And had we not bought it, somebody else would have. And guess what they would have done? They would have,
inclusionary zoning. That was what inclusionary zoning is great.
Evicted, no argument there. They would have evicted everybody in it, they would have demolished it, and they would have built market rate housing with the inclusionary zoning, of course. But if we want permanent supportive housing for very low to zero income people, many of whom are struggling with very serious issues, whether it's addiction, whether it's mental health, whether they're domestic violence survivors, this is the kind of play we need to make. The $2 million, I wish it was free. It's not. The $2 million was the price to get rid of the guy who owned it so that we could own it and do it right for the people who need it the most.
Thank you for your candor, Mayor.
Thank you, sir.
Mayor.
Commissioner Udaly.
Mr. Johnson, while I don't agree that it's not a net gain for the city, I do share your frustrations. I don't think any property owner providing substandard housing in our city should be allowed to raise rents at all. And I would like to see the city get a lot more aggressive with enforcement. It's one of my regrets no longer having BDS that we weren't able to make headway with that, but I'll continue to advocate for it.
Thank you for listening.
Good morning.
Good morning. Okay, so they're still kicking people out of hospitals and kicking people out of shelters. And when I say people, I mean the elderly, the disabled, and the mentally ill. And these people are ending up on the street, and then the business owners call Clean and Safe. And did you know that Oregon state law says that you cannot repeatedly and abusively call city services like 911 and your point of contact? It's between a $10,000 and $25,000 fine when you do that. Now, if you're kicking people out of hospitals and you're kicking people out of shelters and they're disabled and they have nowhere to go, guess where they're going to be? And it was really unfortunate that you allowed those bars to buy that alley on 2nd and Ankeny, because now they're proprietary. And when people are legally parked who live in Salvation Army Female Emergency Shelter. They're calling and complaining about their cars when they're legally parked. I know someone who's in there who gets up every morning and she would move her car, and then that guy, the business owner from the Oyster Bar, complained. She got 3 tickets and they towed her car even though she was moving her car during, she was parking during the legally allowed time. And then she would get up very early in the morning, 5 a.m., and she would go down and move her car. From what I understand, the parking there was between the very late night and 7 a.m. in the morning was legal to park there. And so this guy was calling and having her ticketed and towed when she was legally parked. Now, why is that? So I would like the city to like give her back her, wipe those tickets off and give her her car back and give her towing money back. And this happens all the time everywhere, is that these business owners are calling in abusively and repeatedly when nobody's doing anything wrong. So like they'll call when, people cross the street to smoke, where those planters are. So let's not sugarcoat the fact that there's more and more disabled people and elderly ending up on the streets, and there's no housing for them. So.
Thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Joe Walsh, and I represent Individuals for Justice. We take no money from this council. We take no money from the county or the state. And I wish you would require people that give you testimony to tell you how much money they do take. How much does city concern take from the city? I don't know. In the millions. How much does anybody that testify before you take? That would be something interesting to hear, because your testimony is really biased. If you take money, if I give you $100, you're not going to tell me I'm a rotten person. If you take no money, you may tell that person they are a rotten person to the core. We can't stop you from doing this because you've been doing it for 50 years, 20 years, 10 years. You buy property, you put people in there, you buy more property, you put people in there, you close down on the original property, and you put people in there. You just move people around. That's why we have 1,700 that we know of on the streets, and we can't seem to do anything about it. You had 10 years on a 10-year plan, and you blew it. Did you apologize? No. People are dying on the streets. We're gonna die, people die. We had 48 die already this year. We had 80 last year, and you keep doing the same things. Would you think outside the box? Come on, a creative solution to the problem. This is not rocket science. Ask the people on the street, can I help you? What is it you need? Tell me. Don't use psychiatrist. Don't use Mark. He doesn't know anything. He is a millionaire. You guys are millionaires. You know nothing about being broke. Nothing. So ask them. Ask Commissioner Dudley. She may be able to tell you. I can't. I've never been on the street. But we have people here that have. Ask them. You keep doing the same thing. We give you money on the bonds over and over again, and you blow it over and over again. And sooner or later, people are going to realize you're going
Mr. Walsh.
to get voted out of office.
The last person who signed up is Steve Entwistle Sr.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm Stephen Entwistle. I ran for mayor twice, and I'm a former Golden Gloves champion and former homeless. Well, actually, I'm still homeless. Yeah. I live in a place that is called housing. But to me, housing is a house. So that's a lie. It's privatized sheltering, and that's a correct term and not housing. Unless you want to consider housing warehousing. That would be more of the term. But housing in itself, no. Privatized sheltering. Why? Freedom. There's no freedom. Because you have to have a manager check to make sure that whoever you bring over isn't somebody that's on a bad list. And you can't have anybody over after 10 o'clock, no visitors. The electricity's shut off at 10 o'clock, so you can't cook. The electricity doesn't come on until 8 in the morning, so you can't have coffee or get ready for work. Okay? That's your housing that you're talking about, okay? And I'm not going to even go into the part where the bed bugs and the cockroaches and the contracts that these private property managers just gloat over, because they're making some bucks, okay? And when you get somebody that's on Social Security, and they're getting whatever, $700, $800 or whatever a month, and then you charge through your, quote, housing, 1/3. Now, most people that get SSI or SSD or whatever are only getting about 1/3 of what they really need to survive to begin with. And then you go and take 1/3 of that, and then you put them in the shelter and you say, well, they're supposed to be humble and know that they're being taken care of. No, that's wrong. And you wonder why people don't want to stay in that housing. You wonder why they go back on the street. That's the reason why, okay? But nobody seems to care about that. You know, we got a shower curtain that's been in that shower. We got 40 people that use that every day. You know, it hasn't been changed. It hasn't been, you know, it's the same. It's actually starting to deteriorate. It's moldy and stuff. You know, a lot of people don't even go into the shower. You know, and then I'm supposed to bring folks over to, you know, homeless folks to try to help them, bring them in off the street, right? And then I got to be embarrassed to show them what kind of shower that we have to live in. You guys don't understand. We live in conservative world. For 50 years, it's been conservative world, okay? It's wrong, okay? Homelessness is going to increase, okay? You think the president's going to do anything to help homelessness? What politician have you heard anything talk about homelessness at all? And in fact, in the last 5 years, 10 years, none. Okay, that's the problem. Conservatives. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Lightning. I represent Lightning Super Data XX1 PDX. Again, on the bond money, as I've always stated, I do want to see new development for units that'll last long term, basically outlive us all in here. Now, one of the issues you have on this is you're buying this originally using TIF funds from the downtown waterfront urban development, and then you're going to possibly redevelop it using the bond money. I'm a little confused why you just didn't buy this with the bond money. Maybe that can be explained. Now, I understand you're going to try to preserve this for the next 2 years, so does that mean you're going to put a lot of money in preservation? And I noticed you did a seismic study also. I sure hope you're not going to do a seismic upgrade on a building you're going to possibly demolish in a few years. So those are some concerns to me. I would rather have this building saved, preserved, and keep the cost minimal, and then do your 70 SROs and implement supportive services into the building currently. So I'm not really a fan of seeing this building being demolished. And one of the biggest concerns I have, and it's also referring to the Oakleaf Mobile Home Park, is that my main focus on these tenants is if they're not going to be able to stay in this building, that you don't, as the city, think you have a right not to pay their relocation fees. I want you to pay double the amount to these people when they are relocated, because in my opinion, you think you have a pass on that. You took a pass on Oakleaf Mobile Home Park, where you brought all these people in, filled this place up with the idea there might be a point that they can stay in there and maybe even end up buying their spaces. Well, guess what? You threw most of those people out and you didn't pay any relocation fees to them. You came in here with these people and then you threw them out of their place and you paid them nothing, and then you stand there and go, well, it just didn't work out. I'm sorry. No, that doesn't work with me. At the very least, you need to pay their relocation fees on that Oakleaf Mobile Home Park. Send them a check now in the mail from Lightning and pay that full fee. And on this here, if you remove these tenants out, they better all get these relocation fees paid, because I'm going to monitor this and I'm going to make sure you treat these people the same way anyone else should be treated on these fees. You have no exemptions on this because you're the city. You pay them the fee and you write them that check and let them smile about receiving all that money. Is that going to be done? Can any of you answer me? Will they be paid the relocation fees?
Thank you.
Can any of you answer me that?
Thank you for your testimony.
That's what I thought. Shame on you. Shame.
Does that complete
that's
public
all?
testimony? Very good. Call the roll.
Udaley?
Aye.
Fritz?
Congratulations and thank you to the Portland Housing Bureau on the acquisition of this property and for the partnership with the Joint Office and Central City Concern. 70 units of permanent supportive housing is really significant. Congratulations, Mayor. Aye.
Fish?
Again, I want to thank the voters for overwhelmingly passing ballot measures 102 and 26-199. And in concert with the Portland Housing Bond and the monies we have left, we'll be able to stretch the tax dollar and serve even more people. Last year, we set an audacious goal of 2,000 units of permanent supportive housing. It is a national best practice. It is our most effective tool in addressing chronic homelessness. I am pleased that we continue to make progress. And this is difficult because this is deeply affordable, subsidized housing with services. And we haven't figured out all of the ins and outs of how we're going to cover the costs of the services. But we're making steady progress. And I'm also pleased that we are acquiring this particular building, and in time, we'll make sure that it's a community resource for the next 100 years. Aye.
Saltzman?
Well, this is a great addition to our portfolio of bond-funded projects. Congratulations, Mayor. Very much needed. And you know, it's my understanding, from the tenant relocation ordinance debate, I think we made it abundantly clear that public agencies are responsible, just like the private sector landlords are, to pay relocation expenses. So I fully expect when this building is renovated, there will be relocation payments made by the city or Home Forward to the tenants at that time. Aye.
Wheeler?
So there is a strong disposition in this chamber to not try anything different, to stick to the status quo, to not take any risks. I heard somebody stand up and say, why do you guys always do the same thing over and over again and expect something different to happen? Well, this is something different. We are reinventing the SRO model. This is just the first of many projects you're going to see like this. And the goal is to connect people who really, truly need a helping hand, get inside, out of the elements, into a place where they can get whatever help it is they need to regain their lives. And how many times have we heard people sit at those microphones and say, that used to be me? And then somebody connected me, or someone's connected me to the help I needed. And now I've got a job and I've got my family back, and I've, more importantly than anything else, I've got my sense of dignity and my sense of pride back. These kinds of projects are what it is going to take for this community to be able to make progress against the scourge of homelessness. And frankly, I find it ridiculous that every time we bring an idea that I believe is a good one, and I believe is a solid one, we hear 100 different reasons why we can't do it, why we shouldn't do it, why we should stick to what we are doing. That's not where I'm going. I'm going in a different direction. And this project, the Westwind, is the beginning of a different direction for this administration and for the Housing Bureau. And I believe we will look back on this and we will say this was the right strategy to help a lot of people. No, not just the people who live in the building, but the people who will live in the building and the people who will live in the successor to this building on this site for many, many years to come. This is the kind of leadership that you asked me to provide when you elected me your mayor. You may have some second thoughts about that. That's okay. But this is what you asked me to do. This is the kind of leadership I told you that I would provide as your leader to address the homeless situation in our community. So don't expect less of these. Expect more of these coming down the road. I vote aye. The ordinance is adopted. Thank you. Thanks to my colleagues. Next item.
Item 1167, accept Portland Parks Board Annual Report to Council.
Commissioner Saltzman. I'm sorry.
That's
Commissioner
news to me.
Fish,
That was a
I
while ago.
apologize. Wow.
That's a first.
It is a first.
It's always been my honor to be confused with Commissioner Fritz. And now
I picked the wrong week to give up coffee, Commissioner Fish.
Oh, boy. But we do have, Mayor, what you have highlighted is that we do have the luxury of 3 former and current Parks commissioners on this council. And so I have some brief opening remarks, and we welcome Pat. Kendall won't be joining us, I guess, so we welcome the chair of the Parks Board, and we also welcome the interim director of the Parks Bureau. The Portland Parks Board was established in 2001 to advise the city, to advocate for high-quality park and recreational services for all residents, and to provide a forum for discussions about parks-related issues. Before we start with the presentations, I'd like to personally thank Pat, our chair of the Portland Parks Board, our vice chair, Kendall, and for their leadership on the board, as well as the other community members who volunteer their time for this important service. We have in your materials the annual report of the Parks Board. I want to thank Commissioner Fritz. She was the commissioner in charge during most of this time, and so most of the accomplishments that are highlighted occurred under her watch. But Pat Frobes, thank you very much for your leadership, and also thank you for agreeing during this year of budget transition to serve as the Bureau Budget Advisory Committee. That's a big ask, and I appreciate that you've taken that on with some other community members, and we look forward to getting your recommendations. Ladies, why don't you take it away?
Good morning. I'm happy to be here representing an energized, informed, and involved Parks Board. We're committed to preserving our legacy of great parks and natural areas and building on that legacy to extend a core essential city service to those who've been historically underrepresented and underserved. In the last 18 months, the board has shifted its focus as a board as a whole to a more strategic system-wide issues and decisions that will affect our parks and natural areas for the long-term future, including cost recovery policy, level of service, and financial sustainability. We welcome the new budget process. As Commissioner Fish said, the board, together with additional community and labor representatives, are acting as the Bureau's Budget Advisory Committee. In that capacity, this year, rather than looking at specific cuts and adds, we're working to align the Bureau's total budget with its strategic objectives and ensure that core strategic priorities are adequately funded. We're working to deepen our partnership with the Portland Parks Foundation, and we very much appreciate the support the City Council gave to one of our key partners several weeks ago. We look forward to assisting in the appointment of a permanent parks director and assisting in making his or her transition a smooth one. We're also looking forward to the renewal of the 2020 vision in the form of Vision 2035, which we hope will be a robust, community-driven process that will include reimagining our parks and open space to deal with the effects of increased gentrification and density. The members of the Parks Board focus on these issues because we all have a very passionate belief in the roles parks and natural areas play in building the foundation for a vibrant, healthy city and vibrant, healthy civic life. We very much have appreciated the support we received over the years from Commissioner Fritz, and now certainly from Commissioner Fish. Did it again. We've been delighted to work with Director Selley, and we've been honored to serve. I'd be happy to answer any questions about the report.
Pat, can I also just, I left one other comment off. Recently, you invited the mayor and me to come before the Parks Board to answer questions that you had structured and then questions from the Parks Board. I don't know that that is something that is typically done by other oversight bodies where invitations extended to both the mayor and to the commissioner in charge. And I know that if it was the normal practice, the mayor would not be getting much sleep on top of his other obligations. But I did very much appreciate the opportunity to have a conversation that you facilitated with both the mayor, whose unique powers is to make a budget and to present it on the table, and the commissioner in charge. And I hope that's a practice that other oversight bodies consider. It certainly facilitates good communication. The mayor had some interesting observations about some of his priorities. We got to have a frank conversation. I think the next time we're going to have a similar conversation, if the mayor's not available, we'll have a senior member of his staff. I thought it was a good innovation, and I appreciated the spirit behind that gathering.
Good, and we certainly appreciated the time of both of you. The mayor had been there once before, and we appreciate it.
Could I just second that? And I appreciated being invited because, as you know, we have sort of a squirrely form of government here, and sometimes the walls go up. And I actually appreciated being asked questions. I appreciated hearing what Commissioner Fish had in mind for the Parks Bureau going forward. And the value to me was understanding how to center the next budget and understanding what your priorities are, understanding what my fellow commissioner, who happens to be the commissioner in charge of the Parks Bureau, what his priorities are, what some of his concerns are. I found it to be a very valuable exchange. And I look forward to more. So thank you for including me. That was very thoughtful.
More than welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I would note that you also visited the Parks Board while I was Commissioner in charge and responded to their request to keep coming back. And so I appreciate knowing that you have kept your word, as I expected.
And since Kia is at the table, I should also say that to Director Selley that you could not ask for a more welcoming transition than I've received from both the interim director and her leadership team. And I think there's light at the end of the tunnel in terms of the briefings we're going to get on the core programs of the Bureau. We've done more than I can count, and we have a number to go. But the Bureau has been very welcoming and has been working overtime to make sure that their newest commissioner in charge is up to speed on their work and has the tools to meaningfully engage in the big policy questions that we have to take up. So, Kia, I want to thank you and your leadership team for the courtesies you've extended to me and to my office.
Thank you, Commissioner. And Mayor Wheeler and Commissioners, I am Kia Selley, Interim Director of Parks and Rec. And I want to take this opportunity to thank the Parks Board, particularly Chair Frobes and Vice Chair Clausen, who couldn't make it today. They have spent countless hours guiding the board as well as guiding staff. And the board has provided instrumental work that will continue to make us more financially sustainable, as well as to really help us with some of these landmark projects that we have ahead, including Vision 2035. So I want to thank them for their guidance and for the investment in our parks community. I also want to thank them for their collaboration with the Portland Parks Foundation. That has not happened a lot in the past, and they have really reached across the aisle to make our parks and rec community stronger. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Mayor, I make a motion to accept the report.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Fish, a second from Commissioner Fritz. Any further discussion? Carla, please call the roll.
Udaley.
Thank you for the report. I vote aye.
Fritz.
Very much appreciated reading a summary of the results from the last year, and thank you, Commissioner Fish, for acknowledging that I had the honour of being the Commissioner of Charge for most of that. Thanks to Pooja Bhatt and Christina Nieves, who are my Parks liaisons, and to Patricia Frobes and Kendall Clausen. Echo Commissioner Fish's lauding of Interim Director Kia Selly, and I hope that you will engage the Parks Board in the interview process for the permanent director, because I certainly came to rely on their wisdom and their commitment to equity and inclusion, and to having a representative board that covers in its membership all demographics, all areas of the city, all backgrounds. It's really a phenomenal group that I was honored to work with. Aye.
Fish.
Well, let me address that right off the bat. Members of the Parks Board will be included in the panels that review the final candidates and that help make a recommendation to the Commissioner in Charge. So it's an inspired suggestion and one that we're going to take. And I will also say, Commissioner Fritz, I've, in my 10 years, appeared before a number of Parks Boards. We've had really the luxury, I would say, of very committed people with deep roots in this movement serve on the Parks Board. I don't know that we've ever had top to bottom a stronger Parks Board. And probably you could say that I don't think there's been a time when we needed it. I mean, this is probably the time when we've needed the strongest board we have, because we face a big question about future leadership. We face a big question about budget and resources to do the job. We have work to do to continue to extend the benefits of our system to people underserved in parts of our community, and on and on and on. So I think we're very well served. I'm very proud to be the Commissioner in Charge, and pleased to accept your report today. Aye.
Saltzman.
Thank you for your report. Aye.
Wheeler.
Excellent work. Appreciate it. Look forward to a lot more. I vote aye. Report's accepted. Thank you both. Next item, 1173.
Authorize the Commissioner in Charge of the Police Bureau to order content-neutral time, place, and manner regulations for demonstrations held in the city.
Colleagues, this is a second reading of a non-emergency ordinance. We have already heard a presentation and taken extensive testimony on this item. Anything else for the good of the order before I call the roll? Chief, anything else you want to say? Please call the roll.
Udaley.
I want to thank the police chief, her command staff, and the city attorney for answering my questions last week. My office received the written responses to these questions yesterday. We have submitted them to the council clerk, so they will become a part of the record, and we will post them on our website and push the link out through social media so the public can read them as well. For members of the public who were surprised by my line of questioning last week or expressed, I guess, gratitude that I was finally addressing this issue, I want to explain that this was an extremely rare opportunity for us to have a public dialogue with the Police Bureau and the city attorney, that this is actually nothing new for me. I just haven't had a chance to really speak about it publicly. As I mentioned previously, these questions were generated by myself, my office staff, constituents, and advocacy organizations. I asked them with multiple intentions. First and foremost, because these are questions that Portland activists have been waiting years and sometimes decades to hear the answer to. Secondly, to illustrate the many concerns I have with this ordinance. And finally, to give the Police Bureau an opportunity to clarify possible points of misunderstanding with the public. I also want to go on record as saying that I believe the mayor and the police chief have good intentions with this ordinance. Even if they can't be as explicit as I can, I know that they want to stop right-wing extremists from disrupting our city and threatening our residents as much as I do. And I also know that many of our officers are committed to this objective as well. However, because of how existing policies have been and are being applied, I cannot vote to expand their powers. We are trapped in a dangerous dynamic between right-wing extremists, counter-protesters, and police with no clear path forward. This poses a threat to public safety, and there's a growing frustration among the public that we can't seem to manage these protests effectively. I share their frustrations. And I agree that something must change. However, this is not an issue that can be solved by policing alone. We need advocacy organizations to step up, to continue to step up, and offer us meaningful policy solutions and community supports. We need a concerted community effort to shut these right-wing extremists down. Yes, they have constitutional rights that must be protected regardless of how repugnant we find their beliefs, but businesses have the choice of who they choose to serve, and if these groups don't meet their community standards, they shouldn't be helping them peddle hate, raise money, print t-shirts, or publish websites. And if they do meet their community standards, we shouldn't support them with our business. Nationalists, bigots, racists, and fascists are not protected classes. We need our colleagues at every level of government to speak out against hate, and specifically the hate groups who are targeting our city. And we need the media to bring an objective and critical eye to these matters to better help the public understand the issues that we're contending with. Our policies, I'm going to repeat something I said last week because I think it bears repeating. Our policies in our police bureau may have to be content neutral, but I don't have to remain neutral in my remarks. Right-wing extremists pose a greater threat to our national security than ISIS. This is not my personal opinion. This is a fact known by federal law enforcement. Counter-protesters are not the problem. They're a byproduct of the problem, and I'm grateful to the thousands of Portland residents who've engaged in peaceful protest in opposition to this administration, in opposition to the global rise of fascism, and in opposition to homegrown racism and bigotry. I am very concerned about the false equivalencies being made between right-wing extremists and left-wing counter-protesters, both inside and outside of this building. There's a tendency to paint all counter-protesters with the same brush based on the worst actors, when people committing violence and vandalism are a tiny minority of the overall resistance playing out on our streets. And when that behavior is often provoked by the police bureau's crowd control tactics. Counter-protesters occupy a broad spectrum of the left, from moderates to radicals, and the vast majority of them are peaceful. Yet I often hear them all characterized as lawless anarchists. I would expect a more nuanced understanding of left-wing protesters than the antiquated caricatures of the bomb-throwing anarchist. Anarchism at its heart is a political philosophy based on mutual aid and direct democracy, autonomous individuals working together for the greater good in a non-hierarchical system. It is not an inherently violent belief system, and in fact has a strong tradition of nonviolence and pacifism. I'll take anarchists over fascists any day.
Thank you.
Over the past 27 years, since I started attending rallies, marches, and protests, I have personally witnessed police brutality and excessive use of force. I have friends who have been victims of it, and have sued the city and won settlements. I was part of a group of activists being illegally surveilled by the Portland police in the 1990s. I'm not taking this stroll down memory lane for fun or street cred. I'm painting a picture of my perspective as an activist, observer, and now policymaker. We have a policing problem when it comes to protests, but it's not just the protesters. We have each taken an oath to uphold the constitutions of the United States, the state of Oregon, and the City of Portland Charter. We have a moral and legal obligation to defend the constitutional rights of everyone, regardless of whether we agree with their politics, speech, tactics, or strategies. We also have a moral and legal obligation to ensure the public safety. There is a balance to be struck here. Unfortunately, I do not believe this ordinance achieves it. I look forward to continued communication and collaboration with advocates and activists, my colleagues, and the Portland Police Bureau on how to best achieve our obligations and ensure public safety. But with all due respect to the mayor and the police chief, I vote no.
Thank you. Fritz.
Thank you to everybody who took time to testify during last week's hearing, including Representative Janelle Bynum, Andrew Hone of Portland Business Alliance, Steve Folstick of Travel Portland, Kimberly McCullough from ACLU Oregon, Beth Wooten of the Portland National Lawyers Guild, Commissioner-elect Joanne Hardesty, and many others. Thank you, Chief Outlaw, for listening to all the testimony in person and for being here today to hear our comments in person. Thank you to my staff for helping with this response to the Mayor's proposal, especially Cynthia Castro and Tim Crail. And thank you, Mayor Wheeler, for listening to feedback and amending the ordinance to make it much improved from the original proposal. Even so, I cannot support this ordinance. Oregon and the Pacific Northwest have been strongholds of white supremacy for over 2 centuries. The city of Portland has a long and shameful history of discrimination, hate crimes, and racism. This is unacceptable and must end. White supremacists are not welcome in Portland, and the City Council should make that clear in every decision we make. Violence during demonstrations is a community issue that has threatened public safety, resources, our economy, and our reputation as a safe and welcoming city. This is a community issue that requires community engagement and buy-in to address. From its very beginning as a state, Oregon has normalized hate speech and emboldened individuals to act on their hostility towards marginalized communities. Now, vitriolic rhetoric at the national level is further inciting violence all over our country. We can point to many examples, such as the tragedies that took place in Pittsburgh and Kentucky last month, in Charlottesville last year, and in the Max incident that occurred right here in 2017. It is all too familiar as we remember the murder of Ethiopian immigrant Mulugata Sarah 30 years ago. Thank you to the Urban League of Portland for commemorating the anniversary with an inspiring conference yesterday, and thank you, Mayor Wheeler and Commissioner Udaly, for joining me there. We must counter hatred and divisiveness with love and unity. With a policy that proposes to tell people how, when, and where they can protest, the community must be engaged and listened to in forming a proposal. This did not happen before the ordinance was proposed, and the ordinance should not be the starting point for these conversations. We need to convene discussions with stakeholders such as business owners, the Portland Police Bureau, and the ACLU to develop reasonable, specific mechanisms to reduce problems at protests. The ACLU has already signaled their desire to help, as has the Western States Center, the Council on American Islamic Relations of Oregon, and the Oregon Justice Resource Center. There are alternative solutions. We can support counter-demonstration, and we can support counter-demonstrations that draw attention away from white supremacists, rather than feeding into their quest for an audience and a fight. Lawyers will debate whether this ordinance is constitutional. Arguing about the restrictions in court when they may not even help much on the ground is not wise use of taxpayers' money. The regulations distract attention from the underlying problem. There have already been protests about the protest ordinance, and more may happen if it passes. We need unity and compassion in Portland right now, not more arguing amongst ourselves. This ordinance seeks to address the problem of violence at demonstrations by giving the mayor the authority to tell Portlanders and others what to do, with the Portland Police then charged with enforcing those rules, as well as existing laws on criminal and misdemeanor behaviors. The problem we are addressing today is not disparate treatment by Portland Police. The problem is that white supremacy has been woven into the fabric of our community for far too long, and we are faced again with the rise in hate speech by white supremacists, leading to violence and protests and in our community. That's where we need to focus our energy. As we grapple with the violence on our streets, the nation watches us. The proposed ordinance is not an accurate reflection of who we are as a city. Let us show our community and the nation that we are resilient, that when Portlanders come together, we are a force to be reckoned with, that violence will not be tolerated, and both perpetrators and instigators will be held accountable. To do this, we first need to do another thing that Portlanders do well: talk with each other and listen to each other. I'm confident Portlanders can help the council define better solutions than this. No.
Fish.
Mayor and colleagues, after careful consideration, I cannot support this ordinance. But I want to begin this morning with where we agree. Everyone should be welcome in our public square. Hate, bigotry, and violence have no place in our community. And it's long overdue that we all link arms and say to the Proud Boys, Patriot Prayer, and those who would bring hate into our community, stay home. Protecting public safety is one of our basic obligations. Any limits on the rights of free speech and public assembly protected in our state and federal constitution are subject to heightened legal scrutiny. In general, government must establish that those limits are a last resort. There's been too much violence during recent protests, especially instigated by members of alt-right groups using Portland as a staging ground. These events have taken precious resources out of other neighborhoods, leaving East Portland and other areas without the services they, like all of us, help fund and deserve. They also have a consequence for our goals around community policing. My vote today is based on several factors. First, I have concerns about the constitutionality of the protest ordinance. At the very least, it sets us up for a costly and divisive legal battle. Second, I'm not convinced that we've done everything we can with the tools already at our disposal. That includes arresting people who violate our laws. Third, I am encouraged by the offers we have received from civil liberties and civil rights organizations to develop a new approach to address the alt-right violence in our streets. This is a close call for me. The mayor, as police commissioner, is entitled to a certain amount of deference, and I'm grateful to Mayor Wheeler for beginning this conversation. He's right to focus on solutions to the unacceptable violence on our streets and the rising tide of hate and intolerance of a vocal minority. And he has made real progress pursuing the police reform agenda on which he ran for office. At the same time, I cannot ignore the many community voices that have raised fair concerns with this approach and have offered to be part of a different solution. My vote is not a referendum on the job Chief Outlaw is doing. She has the hardest job in local government, and she deserves our respect and our support. Nor is it a commentary on the women and men in uniform who serve and protect our city. They too deserve our respect and support. Rather, it reflects my sincere ambivalence with this path forward and my belief that other alternatives will be more successful. I am grateful to the many community leaders who shared their perspective during this debate. I'm proud of the conversation that we've had among colleagues on this dais, but today I vote no.
Saltzman.
Excuse me, folks. You know, Mr. Walsh, you're here a lot. You know the rules, please.
I know the rules.
Yes, sir. Mr. Walsh, if you continue. All right, we'll take a recess.
That's all right. Well, I want to, first of all, I want to associate myself with many of the remarks my colleagues just made about the state of affairs in our country, in our city right now, and the predominance of alt-right and hate groups. But I come down on this very differently. First of all, I'm no lawyer. I'll leave the legal arguments to the lawyers to decide, but I look at it from a simple matter of how do we best protect Portlanders. And I think in many respects, we all fully respect everybody's right to protest and exercise their rights to free speech. But there's also a public safety factor, as Mayor Wheeler's proposed ordinance does, and that is to provide the mayor the ability to say, do your protests, but do it a block away from each other. So you're not provoking, goading one another. And to the extent that that happens, the Patriot Prayer and Proud Boys, they're playing us like a fiddle. They know they can come down to Portland because they know they can provoke the response, and they know that they can ultimately, the police, to my mind, are often just caught in the middle. And they get provoked too. I mean, they're only human. If you insult somebody, throw something at them, they're going to respond like any human would. They're going to try to protect themselves. They're going to be angry. These are very fundamental, basic human emotions. But I think that, we have too much goading, and we're being played like a fiddle. And, I can't help but think that this week is the 80th anniversary of the Kristallnacht, the night the Nazis played the German people like a fiddle to unleash their fury on Jewish merchants and Jewish residents of their country. And these groups are doing that to us. And I think we need a strong step forward. I think Mayor Wheeler's proposed ordinance, it may not be constitutional, but we need to try things. We need to try solutions. We can't just sit up here and celebrate the First Amendment and say, and at the same time express our concerns about the predominance of the alt-right and hate groups without trying to do something about it and protect Portlanders from getting into situations where they are going to be hurt, maimed, God forbid, even killed. And I see that the current path we're on provides no answers. This is a proposed answer. It's a modest step to protect Portlanders, and I thank Mayor Wheeler and Chief Outlaw for bringing this forward, and I'm pleased to vote aye.
Wheeler.
So obviously, anybody here who can count knows that this is over, but there's a few things I'd like to say nonetheless. First of all, I'd like to start with this. The ordinance, the very first sentence of the ordinance was a reaffirmation of this council's commitment to First Amendment rights, to this council's commitment to the right to assembly and the right to speak one's mind, even if what is being said is considered reprehensible. That was first and foremost in our minds. So those who say that this is an abridgment of the First Amendment, I want you to know that's certainly not my intention, and that was never my intention. There are two people in this city who are routinely held accountable for violence on the streets, and both of them are sitting in this chamber, Chief Outlaw and myself as the police commissioner. And it is our responsibility to maintain the public safety during demonstrations. And the safety includes those who are demonstrating and those who are counter-demonstrating. And we have seen many instances where people who are peacefully assembled get caught up in a violent situation with an opposing group, and that is the kind of thing we don't want to see happen, because it actually dampens people's enthusiasm for showing up and being heard. Nobody wants to be put at risk. I asked for this tool as an additional tool, and I was a little surprised by some of the testimony. You said, well, if you do this, that means you're not doing that. No, we're going to do a lot of different things. We're going to continue to enforce the laws with the tools and the resources that we have available. Second of all, we're going to continue to set clear expectations around protests. And you've heard me say the mantra over and over again. Don't block the regional transit system. Don't go on the bridges. don't commit acts of violence or vandalism. Those things are unacceptable, and there is no circumstance where violence is a justifiable means to a political end. And we've made that very, very clear. If we're going to enforce the laws, and I heard from a number of the constitutional attorneys who came up, and by the way, I hope you appreciated the fact I didn't try to run the table. We invited the ACLU and others to come up and speak in opposition, freely speak in opposition for as long as they wanted to, against the ordinance that I was proposing, because I really wanted us to take a deep dive, and I wanted us to hear the different nuances around constitutionality and the law. And what I heard repeatedly is, you need to enforce the laws that you have on the books. Great. If we're going to do that, though, I hope we're committed to giving the police bureau the resources, the personnel, the tools, and the training that they need to be able to do that safely. And you heard Chief Outlaw testify that even during that last significant protest, she made the decision, or her commanders, her command staff made the decision to pull in resources from North and East Portland. That meant people who are paying their taxes in the city, who expect a certain police response, did not get it, because all of our resources were deployed downtown. And she said, as a law professional, a law enforcement professional with several decades of experience, that she believed this ordinance would actually reduce the need for arrests by clarifying in advance what the rules are, not abridging people's First Amendment rights, but keeping people separated within a reasonable distance so they could still hear each other, they could still interact, but there would be less of an opportunity for people to commit acts of violence. This ordinance, despite what I read in the paper, I was a little surprised to read a couple of times that it gives broad authority to the mayor around crowd control. In fact, it was a very narrowly tailored ordinance, and I hope at some point, for those of you who didn't actually, and a lot of times people don't want to wade through an ordinance, I totally get that, but read it. It's actually very narrowly prescribed, and it explains very specific circumstances where the ordinance could be implemented, and it required an unprecedented level of transparency before the ordinance could be enacted. I thought this was a very reasonable preemptive tool to have in our toolkit, along with other tools that we have. Other cities have successfully defended time, place, and manner restrictions in court. We heard a lot on the constitutionality, and like Commissioner Saltzman, I am not a constitutional lawyer, but I will tell you, constitutional lawyers are divided on the constitutionality of this particular ordinance. It maybe came a little bit too late in the game to help shape the narrative. I've learned one thing, colleagues, from this. If you put an ordinance out there and there's any question about its legality, make sure your lawyers get to the media first. Because once that frame is set, it is very, very hard to turn that frame around. And I wondered why people were jumping before they'd even seen the final version of the ordinance and expressing their complete confidence that the ordinance was unconstitutional, having not actually read all of the details in the ordinance. And now I know why. It is nearly impossible to turn that narrative. But there was somebody who did chime in near the end, and I want you to know who she was. Her name is Mary McCord. She is the senior litigator for the Institute for Constitutional Advocacy and Protection. She is a professor at Georgetown University's Law Center. She was the one who led the successful litigation that we heard a lot about on behalf of the city of Charlottesville and local small businesses and neighborhood associations against the alt-right, white nationalists, and militia organizations and individuals who engaged in paramilitary activity after the August 2017 Unite the Right rally. She said, number one, the ordinance on its face is constitutional. She agreed with our city attorney and disagreed with some of the testimony that we heard last week. She said, on its face, the ordinance is constitutional. The second thing she said was that there are other legal strategies that we could pursue in addition to this ordinance. And we had a couple of very good conversations, and we heard some testimony around some potential other legal strategies. We heard about educational strategies, training, litigation. All of these things were ultimately included in the ordinance, and I appreciate that. There were concerns about the mayor, in this case actually the police commissioner per the ordinance, sorry, being able to put into place time, place, and manner restrictions, recently referred to how, when, and where a group could protest. Colleagues, we already do that. When you file for a permit with the City of Portland, you are already agreeing to a time, place, and manner restriction. The difference is we know how many police are needed. We know where they are needed. We know if there's conflicts with other events that are taking place. Commissioner Fritz raised a great question last week, and I don't think it was very well stated in the ordinance, and I want to clarify this. The number of people. People said, well, is Ted going to say only 100 people can show up for a demonstration? Number one, it would be stricken down as unreasonable on its face if it was a large public space, but we already have restrictions on the number of people. If you file for a permit and you want to be in a park block and you say, I want 10,000 people in a park block, we're going to tell you no. We're going to suggest a different location, maybe Waterfront Park, where more people could congregate safely and also not damage the facilities that we have. This ordinance only impacted those who choose not to apply for a permit. I want to be very clear. It would have put non-permitted demonstrations on the same footing with permitted demonstrations under very limited circumstances where we knew two or more groups with either a history of violence or a stated intent of violence were coming together. So where does this leave us? This was an approach the chief and I thought could help address what we saw as a potentially escalating situation in our community. We put it out there. It has not carried the day. We are still interested in doing something more than the status quo because the status quo is clearly not working for our community. While we are very concerned about the rights of protesters and counter-protesters, we are also concerned about the rights of everybody else who works and lives in this community and who are increasingly troubled by what they are seeing unfold on the streets of this community. I heard a lot of people at the microphone say last week, we have different approaches, we have new approaches. I hope they mean something other than a 2-year-long conversation about the general state of policing. We have plenty of tables already focused on police reform. We already have our directives on crowd control that have been out there to the public. We already have a lot of conversations going about best policing practice, 21st century policing, community policing, the use of technology like body cams around policing. Those conversations are ongoing. But if we have more to say on this immediate issue, this urgent issue, that is unfolding on our streets today, I'll continue to work with anybody who has a good idea. Last but not least, I read in my Willamette Week this morning, Bobbin Singh said something, and I have to call it out because I believe he mischaracterized the meeting that my staff and I had with him. He did offer 3 good ideas around policing. His first idea was that we educate public employees, we educate the community, and we educate the media about the alt-right in our community. I'm all for education. The second thing, I told him I'm not supportive of it. It was a whole slew of ideas and discussions and conversations that are already taking place at other tables. I don't want to create more tables. I wanted to engage him and his group at the tables that already exist. The PSEP, other, the CRC, other areas where we already have that opportunity. The third thing he suggested was that we go to Georgetown, we go to Mary McCord, the woman who endorsed my ordinance, and work with her and her colleagues to see if there is another strategy to keep militia-type organizations out of our community. And Commissioner Fish was compelled by that, and he added it as an amendment to this ordinance, which I appreciate, and I think we should continue to take a good hard look at that strategy as well. So that was a little longer than I wanted to be. I apologize. I just wanted you to know that this is very important. I'm sorry, there's one more thing, and then I promise I'll stop. Commissioner Fish said something that resonated with me, and that is telling Joey Gibson and the Proud Boys and others to stay home. I want to remind you all, I tried that strategy. And I honestly learned from that experience because I heard from many people, including many people in this room right now, that that was unconstitutional. I asked the federal Homeland Security to cancel the parks permit for the Proud Boys in the days following the Max murders. And I wasn't saying stay out of Portland forever. I was just saying don't come this week when our community is angry and it's grieving and we have limited police to deal with what could be a potentially very, very ugly public safety situation. I thought it was a very reasonable approach to take, but I think something like 150 editorial boards around the country described me as an enemy of the First Amendment. The ACLU was profoundly upset with me. Others in this community, in this room, felt that I'd really stepped into it and overstepped my bounds as mayor by asking them not to come. Because after all, the First Amendment protects all speech, even reprehensible speech. So this ordinance was something else, new direction. I obviously vote aye. I support it, but I will continue to work with you and the chief and anybody else who has good ideas. As a community, we got to come together and solve this problem. I vote aye, but the ordinance fails. Thank you. Next item, let's see, 1174, please, Carla.
Appoint Sarah Stevenson, Molly Rogers, and Felicia Tripp Folsom to the Portland Housing Advisory Committee for terms to expire November 30, 2021.
Good morning, Shannon.
Good morning, Mayor Wheeler and Commissioners. Shannon Callahan again from the Portland Housing Bureau. I am pleased to be here today to request your approval for the appointment of 3 new members to the Portland Housing Advisory Commission. The Portland Housing Advisory Commission advises the Director of the Housing Bureau, the Housing Commissioner, and City Council on policy, strategy, and resource issues. It helps us promote improvements within our own bureau and within the larger housing system. I am honored that each of the appointees today are willing to devote their time and expertise to advise us. They are each respected experts in their field and represent different facets of the work involving affordable housing. Felicia Tripp Folsom is the Deputy Director of the Portland Housing Center with deep expertise, experience, and a passion for creating new homeowners. Her particular emphasis is on closing the minority homeownership gap in our region. And Felicia was here with us this morning, but unfortunately had to leave just a few moments ago. I'm joined today by Molly Rogers, who is the Director of Asset Management and Housing Policy at Home Forward. She brings to us best practice expertise in successfully managing and operating buildings with appropriate services. And also joining me today is Sarah Stevenson, the Executive Director of Innovative Housing, Inc., a committed nonprofit developer, owner, and operator of more than 1,300 units of affordable housing with an emphasis on wraparound services. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to both Sarah and Molly to say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. So I'm Sarah, and I began working with homeless men and women in Washington, D.C. in 1994. For the last 24 years, I've dedicated my professional life to creating safe, accessible, and affordable housing for low-income people. I've done this in DC, in New York, and in Portland, where I was born and raised. I feel very strongly that home is the foundation upon which we build our lives and that everyone deserves a safe place to live. I would be honored to join the Portland Housing Advisory Commission to contribute my passion and my expertise to this city that I love as we work together to find a path out of our housing crisis. If the last 24 years has taught me anything, it is that affordable housing is not easy or fast. But I do know that you all share my commitment to this work and that we can do better. We have the political will, the professional capacity, voter support, and significant resources to get started on our solution. What we need is a comprehensive plan with clear goals and measurable outcomes that moves us toward housing for people of all abilities and income levels. It will take time, but our leaders, our housing providers, the public, and most importantly, those who do not have stable housing, need to know that our city has a plan that makes sense and the steadfastness to implement it. I think that that is true and that we can do that. I appreciate the opportunity to participate in this critical work with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mayor Wheeler and Commissioners. As Shannon said, I'm Molly Rogers. I'm the Director of Asset Management and Housing Policy at Home Forward, the housing authority serving Multnomah County. I've been working in affordable housing development, implementation, and policy making in Portland for 16 years, and prior to that in New York City and Minneapolis. Over this time, I've had the honor to work on ending homelessness initiatives, permanent supportive housing policy and implementation, asset management, capacity building, fair housing, streamlining compliance, turnaround strategies for affordable housing assets, and long-term housing sustainability. I am currently the co-chair of the Housing Alliance's Preservation Work Group, board chair of the Housing Development Center, and member of the Housing Oregon Portland Metro Policy Council. I'm excited about this opportunity to serve on the Portland Housing Advisory Commission because I believe we are poised to take this city to the next level of integration and inclusion with unprecedented resources and tools. I've been particularly interested in inclusionary housing and how to integrate diverse populations within a single community. As the former president of the New Columbia Owners Association, I have seen firsthand the challenges and the benefits and vibrancy of a mixed income community, what it can bring. I'm also extremely interested in figuring out how to better align healthcare with housing, starting with systems alignment and ending with improved outcomes for individuals. What I've learned over the years is that good policy is informed by those affected by those policies and by those asked to implement them. I appreciate this opportunity to join these other leaders on this Portland Housing Advisory Commission. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. That concludes our presentation.
Thank you.
Mayor, I move the report.
Commissioner Fish moves.
Second.
Commissioner Saltzman seconds. Please call the roll.
Udaley?
Well, congratulations, and thank you for your willingness to serve the city. I'm really excited to see what you do. Aye.
Fritz?
This is such an important commission. Thank you so much for your willingness to serve because it's a lot of work. Aye.
Fish?
I was just reflecting on what a fantastic lineup this is, and I'm not one for baseball analogies, but I'm sure there's a Yankees team in the 20s that was comparable to the meat of the order. Sarah Stevenson, Molly Rogers, and Felicia Tripp Folsom are big-time community leaders around affordable housing and addressing homelessness. And I have one special request. So Mayor Adams and I worked on creating the Portland Housing Bureau, and when we created the Portland Housing Bureau, I worked with Director Van Vliet to create the PHAC, the Portland Housing Advisory Commission. It was our hope at the time that it would be an oversight body that not only helped shape the legislative agenda and the priorities of the Housing Bureau, but where the commission disagreed with some action taken or was split in some way, it was our hope that the council would be the beneficiary of that information. And it is actually fairly rare that we get a communication from the PHAC. But in my view, to honor its full potential, the council would welcome the opportunity to hear from the PHAC from time to time. And that includes where you have a dissenting view with the Bureau. After all, it's not just about having Kim-by-you moments. It's helping to understand where there's principal disagreements. And I think this particular body has shown that we can manage principal disagreements at a very high level. So if the PHAC feels that we're on the wrong path, if you feel that an investment we're making is not justified, if there's some policy disagreement, or even if you have comments about how to strengthen an ordinance before council, I know that the three nominees are not by nature reluctant to share that information. But what I want to encourage you is that was really what was intended when we set up the PHAC, was to have a separate independent body that provided us with guidance. So please take full advantage of that opportunity if there is a disagreement about something we're doing. Thank you for your service, and I'm very proud to support all three candidates. Aye.
Saltzman?
Well, thank you, Sarah, Molly, and Felicia, for your willingness to serve, and we really appreciate the wealth of expertise that all three of you bring to this area of housing. I also wanted to point out that Felicia is also the newest member of the Children's Levy Allocation Committee, appointed by Multnomah County as their citizen representative. So she's a busy person. In addition to, we all got to see her daughter being honored last night for her activities and received a Spirit of Portland Award. So I know Felicia, it says in her bio, when she's not working, she's busy carpooling her kids around, so we know she's busy. Anyway, I really appreciate all you've done for our community and all you will contribute as members of the Housing Advisory Commission. Aye.
Wheeler.
I could not be happier that you're willing to step forward. This is a great panel, and I'm very pleased to bring such incredible nominees forward. And yeah, you're already established leaders. You already have a great track record. You already have forgotten more than most of us ever knew about these issues. And we're all going to benefit from your leadership. So thank you for your commitment. We know there's many, many other things that you could be doing. And I'm personally just really pleased, just as a resident here, not even as the mayor, just as a resident. I'm just really happy that we have people like you that are willing to step up and volunteer your time on an important issue. Thank you so much. I vote aye. The report's adopted. Thank you.
Thank you.
And congratulations. Next item is 1175.
Authorize the Bureau of Transportation to acquire certain permanent and temporary rights necessary for construction of the connected Colley project through the exercise of the city's eminent domain authority.
Commissioner Udaley.
Thank you, Mayor. This project will provide seamless pedestrian connections on portions of Northeast Killingsworth and Northeast Prescott. It will advance our Vision Zero goals, and it's also essential to safe routes to schools in the Colley neighborhood. We have Marty Maloney here from PBOT to give you more information.
Excellent. Thank you. Good morning, Mayor, Commissioners. My name is Marty Maloney with PBOT Right-of-Way. The agenda item is to authorize eminent domain authority as well as to the ability to offer just compensation to affected property owners for the needed permanent and temporary rights associated with the Connected Colley project. All affected property owners have been informed about the city's needs for these, for the property rights, and were invited to attend the agenda reading. I guess I'd be happy to answer any questions council might have at this time.
Colleagues, any further questions?
Looks like the
Commissioner Fritz.
Areas are fairly small, is that correct?
Mostly temporary construction easements. We do have a couple permitted acquisitions, but they're fairly minor in nature.
And as far as you know, none of the property owners are concerned about that?
No. I haven't spoken to everybody. I've sent out mailings, but everybody I have spoken to have been on board with the project.
Thank you.
Any public testimony on this item, Carla?
No one signed up.
Well, look at that. You answered everybody's questions, and you're totally non-controversial. That's a good thing. Please call the roll.
Udaley?
Well, thank you, Marty, and thank you everyone who has come together to make this important project happen. I vote aye.
Fritz.
This is a much-needed project in a neighborhood that has a significant lack of sidewalks. So if I were a property owner there, I would be really excited about having a safe access way on very busy streets. So thank you very much for your work. Aye.
Saltzman.
Yes, much needed improvements. Thank you. Aye.
Wheeler.
One more step in connected Colley. Thanks. Great work. Thank you, Commissioner Udaley. I vote aye. The ordinance is adopted. Next item, please, 1176.
Authorize a contract with the lowest responsive bidder and provide payment for the construction component of Road 10R MP 28.77-31.85 project in the Bull Run watershed at an estimated cost of $1,540,000.
Commissioner Fritz.
Thank you, Mayor. My staff and I recently had the opportunity to tour the Bull Run watershed to look at the Water Bureau's assets there. I have challenges with motion sickness, and I would have to say thank you to Russell for driving the van so very carefully. He knows every bump and pothole and curve in the road, and had to take much of it at like 5 miles an hour in order to be able to make it safe and comfortable for us. So, and then when we got to the portion of the road that has been improved, I had a sigh of relief, and it's particularly important because obviously there are sometimes public safety issues that occur in the watershed that vehicles need to travel faster than 5 miles an hour. And so this is a project to continue the improvements in the watershed, and here to tell us about them is Teresa Elliott, Chief Engineer.
Good morning.
Good morning. I think it's still morning. I'm Teresa Elliott, Chief Engineer for Portland Water Bureau. Thank you, Mayor Wheeler and Commissioners. And I, too, have a lot of motion sickness, and so I don't go on those tours any more than I absolutely have to. And for me, it's the windy roads. Forget the bumps. Thank you. I'm here before you asking for approval to solicit bids for a construction project to authorize payment for us to do the Road 10 project. This project will rebuild roughly 3 miles of the Road 10, which is our primary access in the Bull Run watershed. If approved, we will be we expect to be doing bids this winter, probably in January, February, and then construction starting this summer. And we will be using the city's formal competitive low bid process. We have an estimated construction cost of about $1.5 million. And with that, I'm certainly willing to take answers or take questions. I'll take the answers too, but I'm willing to answer questions too. No, that was somebody else.
Colleagues, any questions? Very good. Is there any public testimony on this item?
Yes, one person signed up, Charles Bridgecrane Johnson.
Good morning. Barely good morning.
Still good morning, Commissioners. I think we'll make it. I probably won't even need 3 minutes. But while we were noting people who get perfect testimony unchallenged, it's got to be the professional competence and excellence of Amanda Fritz that leads us to having only me testify in a Water Bureau issue, not the history that Nick Fish had to go through during his time of contention about different projects under the Water Bureau.
And I remember it a little differently, Charles, but
really, come on, Charles.
You're entitled to your
and you just jinxed Commissioner Fritz.
Really?
So she knew it was coming. I want to thank the chief engineer for doing the math so we didn't have to subtract, and for the Water Bureau on keeping the milepost designations down to the decimal point of the hundredth. I don't know if we can even get the pavers to be that accurate, but I look forward to y'all voting yes on this ordinance. Even if you won't be mailing me at 21035 Northeast Sunnycrest Road, Newburgh, Oregon, 97132, where the $1.9 million check for the other project goes. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Very good.
Before you move this to second reading, Mayor, I just want to acknowledge the great work that Commissioner Fish has done over the past 5 years, because there would be a time that there would be 20 people signed up for a simple road improvement in the watershed. So thank you, Commissioner Fish.
Thank you very much.
Well, I feel fortunate because I missed that era. It seems like it's been pretty smooth sailing, so thank you both for that. This is a first reading of a non-emergency ordinance. It moves to second reading. Next item, 1177.
Authorize a contract with the Active Network, Inc. for a not-to-exceed amount of $3 million for a 5-year term to provide hosted software and online services to support recreation program and class registrations, facility reservations, memberships, and payments for point of sale, with the option to extend for an additional 5 years.
Commissioner Fish.
Mayor and colleagues, one way Portland Parks and Recreation provides excellent customer service is by allowing customers to register for classes or to make facility reservations on their computer at home or on the phone. Today we'll hear a presentation about this tool from Claudio Campazano, Parks Business Operations Manager, and David Grinstaff. No?
David, it can't be with us today. We've got Shelley Pendergrass, the Technology Manager for Parks.
Even better. Shelley, welcome. And Claudio is a switch hitter. He is here not only to support this as Parks Business Operations Manager, but if you'd like him to put on his hat as the Independent Budget Office, he's also prepared to tell you why he would have recommended in that position too. No, just kidding. Claudio, take it away.
Great. Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. Claudio Campazano, Finance, Property, and Technology Manager for Portland Parks and Recreation. As the Commissioner mentioned, I'm joined by Shelley Pendergrass, our Technology Manager. So this ordinance authorizes the continuation of our subscription service for our online provider of recreation management software. Portland Parks and Recreation is responsible for developing and maintaining facilities and places for public recreation and providing coordinating recreation services and programs that contribute to the health and well-being of residents of all ages and abilities. Since 1993, Parks has used recreation management software to support recreation program and class registrations, facility registrations, pass sales, payments by point of sale. Parks has contracted with the Active Network since 2009 for these services. Since Parks has offered online activity registrations, starting in 2015, we also began reservations of picnic and wedding sites. 50% of Parks customers register their for activities online, equating to about 100,000 registrations last fiscal year. 30% reserve their picnic or wedding sites online. And so in fiscal year 2017-18, we served 85,000 customers with an approximately 300,000 reservations, and pass sales and transactions through ActiveNet. So Parks software subscription with ActiveNet is built based on a monthly transaction volume. As the total volume of transactions increases, our costs will increase, but the requested amount is based on the last 3 years of transaction history, and we feel pretty confident that we won't surpass the $3 million over the course of the 5 years. So continuation of the ActiveNet software provides continuity for the public and staff. We actually just went through a big transition to their online tool a couple of years ago, and that's been a big lift for the Bureau, but it did require a considerable amount of training and effort. So we're happy to be continuing with this product for the next 5, perhaps 10 years. And it really allows Parks to avoid expensive and time-consuming migration to any new software product, and allows us to provide really efficient and effective support to customers. It's really a key tool for meeting our objectives. So that's really all I've got.
Very good. Any further? Any public testimony on this item?
Maggie, she may have left.
I think she has departed. Very good. Any colleagues, anything else before we call the roll? Please call the roll.
Udaley?
Aye.
Fritz?
I remember what a huge undertaking it was to transition from the previous recreation management software class to ActiveNet. After utilizing ActiveNet for the past 3 years and vetting other vendors, there were 4 other vendors that responded to the request for proposals. I trust Parks' determination that continuing with ActiveNet is the best option at this time. The cost to continue with ActiveNet is also the same as it has been. So thank you very much for your work. Thank you, Commissioner Fish. Aye.
Fish?
Aye.
Saltzman?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye. The ordinance is adopted. Next item, 1178.
Authorize a competitive solicitation and contracting with the lowest responsive and responsible bidder for construction of the Leach Upper Garden Development Project.
Commissioner Fish.
Mayor and colleagues, this ordinance is the culmination of 5 years of planning, design, and fundraising by multiple partners who have a shared vision for improving Leach Garden, an iconic place in East Portland. By having Portland Parks and Recreation move forward with the Leach Upper Garden Development Project, Park continues its commitment to closing the recreation and open space gaps in East Portland. Ross Swanson, Portland Parks and Recreation Project Manager, is here to give us a brief presentation. Good morning, or good afternoon.
Thank you, Commissioner Fish, Mayor, council members. I'm the Capital Project Manager with Parks and Rec for Leach Botanical Garden. I'm here today to seek permission to go out to bid for the Leach Garden Upper Garden Development Project. The project's been in development since 2014 and is a collaborative effort between Parks and Rec, Leach Botanical Garden, or Leach Garden Friends, Prosper Portland, and Metro. It's been a very successful partnership between the agencies and the nonprofit. Leach Garden Friends has successfully raised $1.26 million in the project as part of a challenge grant put forth by Commissioner Fritz. Other project funding comes from Metro, Prosper Portland, Parks STC, and the resulting in a total project budget of $9.8 million. Oh, there's all my notes.
Can you put that in full view?
The scope of the...
Russ, excuse me, could you make that
yes.
larger? Thank you.
Sorry, guys.
There we go. Thank
there
you.
We go. Okay. The scope of the work for this project will include improved infrastructure and utilities for the garden, an aerial tree walk, as you saw in the previous slide, community open spaces, which includes a fireplace terrace and a gathering green that's demonstrated above, habitat and pollinator garden. The project is currently working its way through permits and is preparing to go to bid this winter. In order to do so, we're here to receive authorization from council. And the current opinion of cost for the construction contract is approximately $6.4 million with a moderate level of confidence. I'm here to answer any questions.
Public testimony?
No one signed up.
Please call the roll.
Daly?
Well, thank you, Commissioner Fritz and Commissioner Fish. I love this garden. This is such an exciting project, and I'm just excited to follow it every step of the way. I vote aye.
Fritz?
Thank you for your presentation and all your work on this project. This is an extremely exciting project, and Leach Botanical Garden is a hidden jewel in outer southeast Portland that we hope to become less hidden and more accessible and even more well-visited. For decades, community members have visited the garden to gather, learn about horticultural and environmental sustainability, and find respite from the city. It was what founders John and Lila Leach envisioned for the property. This Upper Garden Development Project will carry on the legacy, and I'm particularly excited about the accessible pathways that will be built. Thanks to Leach Garden Friends, Metro, and Prosper Portland for your funding contributions to make this project become a reality. Thanks to Portland Parks and Recreation. Aye.
Fish?
You know, as a parent, I'm not supposed to favor one child over another, and so as a Parks Commissioner, I'm not supposed to have one partner that I prefer over another, but I want to join with my colleagues in celebrating the real importance of Leach Botanical Garden, not only to our city, but to an underserved part of our city in East Portland. And we got some good news recently. The old Phoenix drugstore that is on I guess it's on Foster, that had been in disrepair for a long time, which is where the Leaches had their drugstore, is now the subject of a preservation effort led by Rick Michelson, of course, and others. And that's one of my favorite buildings, and it's my colleagues know it because it's the last building you see before you head over to the Firefighters Association for your endorsement meeting. And it's a beautiful building that someday will be restored, hopefully, to its great glory. There are many ways that we can support Leach Garden, colleagues. For example, if you're doing an event or you know someone who wants to do an event, you can rent space at Leach Garden. So, for example, my team has decided that when we do our retreat to make our agenda for next year, we're going to do it at Leach. I see Commissioner.
I think we're doing that too.
Daly is saying she's going to do that as well. It's a modest fee, but it's also another way of giving back and supporting what they're doing. I want to thank Commissioner Fritz, who had the great benefit during her tenure of one of the great bull markets on SDC revenue that we've ever seen in this city that go to parks. And she invested quite a lot of money in the future success of this vision for Leach Botanical Garden. And just like Washington Park is a treasure on the west side of the river and has amenities that are citywide in focus, this is on the other side of the river and is also a citywide treasure. I am so pleased that we're getting started by taking this action and putting out a solicitation. I thank the staff at Portland Parks and Rec for their commitment to this project, and I thank my colleague, Commissioner Fritz, for the work she did to get us to this point, and I'm proud to vote aye.
Saltzman.
Well, this is a fantastic master plan for Leach Botanical Garden. It's really exciting, and I'm happy that we're, getting started on making that master plan a reality. Aye.
Wheeler.
It's a stunning vision. Thank you, everybody who worked so hard. I vote aye. Ordinance is adopted. We have a 4/5, 1178-1.
Authorize an intergovernmental agreement with Oregon Department of Transportation for jurisdictional transfer of portions of Pacific Highway 99 West, Barbur Boulevard.
Commissioner Daly.
Okay, so before us today is the last of 3 actions for Southwest Corridor Light Rail project that were needed this fall. In September, we adopted the equitable housing strategy. About 2 weeks ago, we accepted the locally preferred alternative and approved a work plan. And today, we consider authorizing an agreement with ODOT to transfer portions of Barbur Boulevard to the city for ownership. This jurisdictional transfer will ensure that when light rail is added to Barbur Boulevard, that the street is rebuilt to meet city standards for travel lanes, sidewalks, protected bike lanes, crosswalk spacing, and stormwater treatment. We will become the owner and operator of the street. These types of transfers are common between ODOT and the city. In fact, in 1993, we accepted the north section of Highway 99 West in order to add light rail on Interstate Avenue. We've also accepted Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard, portions of Nadeau Parkway, and Sandy Boulevard to transform what were once urban highways into corridors that are at city scale. I'm pleased to offer this agreement today because it brings us one giant step closer to our vision of what Barbur Boulevard could become in the future. In the future, I anticipate returning with a transfer agreement for Nadeau Parkway so we can build the Ross Island bridgehead improvements. Unfortunately, that will not be happening today. We have Teresa Boyle here from PBOT to address any questions you may have.
Thank you. Good morning.
Morning.
I was fortunate enough to be able to listen to some of this morning's testimony, so I have changed the background on my PowerPoint. Managed to bring it in. So we're here today to talk about the jurisdictional transfer of portions of Barbur Boulevard. As Commissioner Daly noted, we have differing standards, we in ODOT, in terms of what we build and how we operate it. And today, the action that we will be taking is intended to facilitate the addition of light rail transit to Barbur. So before you is an intergovernmental agreement. It is set up to only be enacted, the transfer would only be enacted upon receipt of the full funding grant agreement, the federal funds that would bring light rail to the corridor, because that is the thing that actually would build the improvements. This is the portion of Barbur Boulevard that is the subject of today's action. It starts with Barbur Boulevard at Nadeau Parkway and then runs the length of Barbur Boulevard. This is the crossroads area, and that's Barbur Transit Center, so it stops just short of the Barbur Boulevard Bridge. The agreement provides $65 million to replace the viaducts, the 2 viaducts in the Woods area, and it really sets us up to complete the future transfer should the project be funded. I'm available for any questions.
Commissioner Fritz.
Thank you. It only happens if we get the money, and therefore that sidewalks and all the other improvements are guaranteed to be done.
That is correct.
Thank you.
I was just curious. I mean, I'm really happy that the viaducts are being replaced, but I'm also just curious. I mean, do they have any historical significance? I mean, they're pretty impressive public works projects if you look at them from underneath.
Yes, they are eligible, and they are part of our evaluation of the impacts to historic structures. So we're working our way through landmarks and SHPO about those.
Okay. And this is really this is great news, and I'm very happy to, even though I'm not voting yet, to support this agreement.
Well, there goes the suspense on Dan's
Yeah, there
vote.
goes.
Is there any public testimony on this item?
I did not have a sign-up sheet.
Any further questions? Commissioner Fish was going to be back in a minute. Could we just wait one moment for him?
Sure.
We'll just take like a 30-second recess. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. We're back in session. Please call the roll.
Udaly.
Well, thank you, Teresa. This is a very exciting project, and thank you, Commissioner Saltzman, for your support in advance, and of course for the work that you've put into this project. And I just think it's adorable. The engineer would bring up preserving the historic viaducts. We'll definitely take a close look at that. I vote aye, of course.
Fritz.
Thank you, Teresa Boyle, for your work on this. This is a continuation, as Commissioner Udaly said, of conversations we've been having over the past several months. The reason it's a 4/5 is that we were waiting for the state to sign the agreement, I understand, and it needs to be done now so that it can be done before the locally preferred alternative is voted on by Metro. So if anybody's wondering, did we forget to file it? No, that's just how it had to happen. So thank you very much for getting it done quickly. Aye.
Saltzman.
Well, as I said a moment ago, this really is a big deal, and the fact that we're dealing with it in 15 minutes really doesn't do justice to all the work and angst and hand-wringing from ODOT and the City of Portland and whoever else about actually making this a reality. So I'm very happy that this is happening. Thank you, Commissioner Udaly, for bringing this home. Thank you, Teresa, for all the work that you've done to make this happen, too. And it's on to the Ross Island Bridgehead, and there's probably a few other streets, too. 82nd might be one of those. So this is great, and I'm really happy to support it. Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The ordinance is adopted. We are adjourned until 2 p.m.